City Council meeting. Today is June 21st. The time is 6 p.m. Call it to order. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Ronnie Felder, Chairperson Douglas Lawson,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Shirley Lanier, Councilperson Trodrick McCoy,
Here.
Councilperson Kashamba Miller Anderson,
Present.
Councilperson Julia Botel, Jonathan Evans, City Manager,
Present.
Tawana Smith, Interim City Clerk, is present, Don Wynn, City Attorney,
Here.
and tonight we will have our pledge by Ms. Genesis Salmon.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
First, I'd like to start with a moment of silence for the victims in a recent car accident, for the deaths that we've had in our community, and the hurting that we have in our community. If everyone could just take some time to just send some prayers, love, and compassion to everyone that's hurting currently. We'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Genesis. If she can come to the front. Ms. Genesis is a 12-year-old young lady from Riviera Beach. She's a part of the Literacy and Theater Magnet Program at Watson B. Duncan Middle School. Genesis is a straight A student in all courses, and she's going into the 7th grade this coming year. Genesis loves to dance, cook, shop, and do gymnastics. In the future, Genesis plans to double major in business and criminal justice at Florida State University. Genesis is a part of a beautiful city council, number 24, where she takes part in community feeding the homeless, donating clothes and school supplies. Genesis's parents, India and O'Brien Edwards, who reside in Riviera Beach, are teachers at Palm Beach Gardens High School and elementary, and have a tutoring business called Edwards Raw Tutoring and Enrichment Services right here in Riviera Beach. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Genesis. If everyone can please stand. The flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, Genesis. If we can give this straight A student one more round of applause, please. Mr. Evans, do we have any additions, deletions, or substitutions?
No, Mr. Chair.
Board members? Can we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Yeah, her mic is not working.
Walter, if you could check Councilwoman Botel's microphone.
I think I broke it.
Madam Clerk, we had Councilwoman Botel with Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to the conversation in the agenda review, I believe it was discussed about the possibility of moving the last item to consent. If it would be the board's pleasure, it would be staff's recommendation to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Colleagues, are we okay with moving item 11C to consent?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, we're going to move 11C to consent.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Motion to adopt, Councilwoman Botel, and then Councilwoman Miller Anderson second. Madam Clerk?
Yes. Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome, sir.
Consent agenda. All matters listed under this item are considered to be routine in action and will be taken with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council person so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence of the agenda. Does anyone want to pull an item from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
I have a few that I want to pull, and I apologize. I wasn't asked to pull whether I wanted 11C, so I'm going to pull that one. I want 3D and also 3A.
3B,
11C,
11C,
3D,
3D,
and 3A.
3A.
You
11C, 3A, and 3D. Do we have any public comments, Madam Clerk, on consent?
No, sir. Public comment cards on the consent items.
Thank you,
And the
Madam Clerk.
acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Motion to adopt agenda with necessary changes.
So
Moving 11C, 3A, and 3D.
3C, Mr. Chair,
And 3C? 3A, 3D, and 3C, Councilman?
and 11C.
11C as well.
The takes item, yes.
So you have 4 items that you want to pull?
Correct.
Thank you, Councilman.
Now, just so I'm clear, are we going to take 11C in the same order, or are we going to pull it back up right after consent?
Right after consent, Councilman.
Okay.
Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson. I'm sorry, your mic isn't working.
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll go ahead into consent with 3A.
Item number 3A, resolution number 7723, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, creating and adding the position of Building Permit Records Clerk to the job classification list, increasing the authorized complement of budgeted positions for the Development Services Department by adding 4 additional positions, authorizing the Director of Finance and Administrative Services to transfer and appropriate $60,000 from the Development Services Department permit reserves, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date. And again, Mr. Chair, there are no public comment cards on this item.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion been made and properly second. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, at this time, I would ask that the HR Director, Ms. Jackie Bartley, and Development Services Director, Mr. Clarence Sermon, appear to the front of the room to answer any questions related to this particular item. This item is to provide for additional positions to facilitate improved level of service for the Development Services Department. This was a request that was born out of the Development Services Department. HR has reviewed the information with regards to the position and concurs with the recommendation. There is monies that is being pulled out of the reserve fund to facilitate said additions to the position, and staff is prepared to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Ms. Jackie, Mr. Sermons, welcome.
Should I just ask my question, or is there a presentation? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So thank you, Ms. Bartley and Mrs. Sermons. What's interesting is, I know we talked about this yesterday, but I'm very interested in why item number 3F, when we go out and hire CAP, wouldn't come out of the same budget instead of professional services, because that did come up, that's what they would be budgeted out of. So why wouldn't we be paying CAP government out of the same $3.6 million reserve that we have inside of the building permits fund? And perhaps if we have to include our finance director, that's even better, because that wouldn't make sense for that to come out of professional services if we also use professional services for attorneys, and CAP is going to be doing plan reviews. That's completely associated with the building permit process.
Mr. Chair, for the record, Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services.
Go ahead, thank you.
For that particular question, paying consultants, we would operate out of the allocated department budget first and foremost to cover those types of expenses. This particular item is for a salary expense, and generally our professional services and other line items in the approved budget would not carry enough excess to fund positions. Therefore, we are looking to the reserved pot of money to fund these positions through the end of the fiscal year, whereas expected third-party expenses we would pay for out of the already approved existing department budget.
Right, but the issue with that is, I mean, we already have a trim overall city budget that's set aside, and it's a budget plan. So if we had those folks in-house, they would be coming out of that building permit fund. Why not have the consultants paid out of that same fund? Because what you're doing, right, is no different than what Tallahassee does when they say anytime you buy a lottery, you support education. Well, the reality is you're taking monies that would have already been set aside for education, and you're now redirecting them somewhere else. So all I'm simply asking is, if we're going to have consultants to do the job that's associated with the building official and building permits, it should come out of that same permit fund, where the permit fund is restricted to solely that amount. On the other side, when you have an operational budget, that can cover a number of different things, but I don't want to rob from Peter to pay Paul when Paul had the responsibility all alone. And if we had employees that was in those roles and FTE positions, that would normally be coming out of that building permit fund. So I respectfully, in lack of better words of saying this, help me understand and rationalize how that is okay. Because I would expect that operational fund is going to be set aside for other, perhaps professional development, reallocated in some other fashion. But that was clearly the explanation that was provided yesterday, and hearing it and reviewing this again doesn't make sense. And if that's a question for Mr. Sherman, he's there.
Sure. Good evening, Randy Sherman, Finance Director. Councilman McCoy, you're correct. So when we budget for development services, there's part of the development services budget that is paid for, I'll call it by the general fund. And then there's part of the development services budget that is paid from the building permit revenue that comes in. So this building permit fund that we have, all the revenues in essence go into that fund. When they spend money that is eligible, it comes out of that fund. The difference that we have between 3A and 3F, 3A, we are adding positions that have not been in the budget. Okay, so there is no money in the budget to cover those positions. So we're looking to transfer money that's in that fund, and there's $3.6 million in that fund, to cover these positions just for the rest of this year to get them through September. On the 3F item, the department has a budget for professional service, contract service, that has already been targeted to come out. Now, when they spend it, it'll again come in and out of that reserve fund, but they already have a budget, so they don't need additional money put into their budget. They actually already have an appropriation.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
And I would respectfully disagree. And that's that goes to the same point that I raised yesterday. And I spoke to both the deputy city manager, assistant city manager, and the city manager over the weekend about this very issue, that we do have needs in our general fund that's specifically allocated to development services for code officers. When we don't have officers out on the street over on the weekends, that's more than enough reason to make sure that we keep those monies that's set aside in that budget available specifically for development services issues, which includes code compliance. So my question to you, Mr. Sherman, would we be wrong in taking 3F and drawing that money out of the building permit fund money?
If that's the desire of the board, you can do that. But again, come the end of September, if we haven't used it, it's just going to go right back into that reserve fund. We have to report that by the end of the calendar year, what that balance is. So we wait till the budget closes and then we'll reconcile those numbers. But if you want to transfer additional money there, I don't believe you need it. But if you feel more comfortable doing that, that certainly is.
Mr. Sherman,
is your call.
respectfully, I think it's an operational decision as to whether we need it. I made a very good point over the weekend and yesterday as to why we need it. So we certainly need the monies in development services overall budget. My question to you is, would that be a violative of some sort of accounting principle or the regulations regarding the building permit fund? Because what I don't want to do is have a fund, just like we talked about the catastrophic disaster fund, that can only be used for one purpose, when we're not actually using it for items that should come out of there. And that's exactly my point that I'm making. I don't want to sit here and then have some sort of shortfall. I know we got another 3 months, a little over 3 months remaining in this fiscal year, but the very point is we're going to have these very intense budget discussions. So we need to make sure that we're not leaving anything on the table when it comes to that building permit fund, because that is essentially removing resources that we could be using elsewhere. That's preventing us from using resources that we could be using elsewhere.
Right. And to your question, no, that doesn't violate any policy practice. If you want to, I guess, amend the resolution and add that, again, you can certainly do that.
I would like staff support on that because obviously that is going to be a vote of the city council, but certainly, I don't have an issue with approving a resolution or even adding the positions because I think it's very much needed, the amount of development applications that we have. I just want to make sure that we can actually be able to use those monies where we can and then, shore up our operational budget for development services to do other items like staffing,
Right.
like professional development and that other thing. So, that would be what I would like to see, members.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Councilman, any other comments?
That's it, but I would reserve to make a amendment. And, truthfully, right, hold on. I don't even know if an amendment is necessary because the resolution on its face is just authorizing it. And the backup is where it speaks of what budget is coming out of. Wouldn't that be administrative?
I'm sorry, Councilman, which item are you speaking to? F or A or F?
A. Well, I'm sorry, F. It would be F. Technically, it would be F.
Right, F, it's really more of administrative, but again, if you,
Right. Okay.
I don't know if we,
So
did we
there's
pull
no
F?
amendment necessary.
Okay, right,
Thank you.
I would agree.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
believe the next item is 3C. Councilman McCoy, 3C.
Yes, sir.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do not have any public comment cards on 3C, and acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Thank you.
Resolution number 93-23, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing settlement in the case of Stephen Jerome versus the City of Riviera Beach, case number 502022, C as in Charlie, A as in Apple, 004833XXX, M as in Mary, B as in boy, authorizing preferred governmental claims solutions to make payment in the amount of $132,800.00 as a full final settlement and providing for an effective date.
Motion to approve resolution number 93-23.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, this matter is handled by the Office of the City Attorney. Ms. Nguyen?
Yes, Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councilman, thank you.
So, Ms. Nguyen, I just found out today, was this the original offer that was proffered to the city?
No. The
What was
original offer, this was a negotiated settlement.
Okay, what was the original settlement offer that was proposed?
I believe it was at the cap of 200
Okay,
was what the plaintiff requested.
do you
And we
recall?
negotiated down to this number.
Right, so does that not, an offer that's proffered does not need to come to the board?
It's before you now.
Right, but the original offer.
No, Mr. McCoy, I have the authority to settle cases on behalf of the city where the city is the defendant. I bring those cases to you. If they're over the manager's authority, you have the right to accept them or reject them.
So it's your discretion.
To negotiate on behalf of the city, yes.
So-
I don't bring every offer to the city. For instance, if we're in mediation, we always say it's subject to approval of the city council because I don't have the authority to actually settle, but I do have the authority to negotiate.
Right, but if you don't have the authority to settle, you have the authority to negotiate. We had a situation where we have an employee that I'm not going to name that offered a settlement, and ultimately, after an extended period of time of litigation, it ultimately came to us after failed negotiations. So, like, what's the trade-off here? Like, at what point does this come to us? Because, speaking to someone who's related to this person, I'm like, well, I didn't know anything about a settlement being offered for the sovereign immunity limits. So what's the trade? At what point does that occur?
When it's settled,
Right, no. What point do you bring it back to us for us to decide whether we're going to accept the settlement?
at the end, when it's settled.
Okay, so what do you use in your professional judgment that you decide I'll take this to the city council for their approval. At what point in the negotiations do you operate off of some sort of percentage reduction off of the original offer?
No, as you know, for most of our litigation, or generally all of it, we have outside counsel. There are different factors in each case. It depends on the medical bills. It depends on the request of, and how reasonable the request is of the plaintiff. It depends on the injuries. I mean, there are a whole lot of factors that go into it.
There's a name that I didn't understand. Catlin Tivit concurs with the settlement. Who is that?
That is one of the excess, that's the spouse. There's a loss of consortium claim.
Okay. And who was outside counsel?
The firm of Marshall Dennehy.
Okay. All right. Good enough.
Thank you, Councilman McCoy. Let the record reflect Mayor Ronnie Felder is on the dais. Colleagues, any other questions? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, 3D.
3D, Resolution number 92-23, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement for professional services between the City of Riviera Beach and Angela Gamble to provide legal support services in the area of litigation and claims, amending the term and fee of the professional service contract by exercising the one-year option to renew the agreement for an amount not to exceed $84,000. The same to be paid from the professional other account number 10116101-53100 and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do not have any public comment cards on this item, and the acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Motion to approve
Denied.
resolution number 93-23.
Second.
Councilman McCoy?
I offered up a move to deny. And then I think simultaneously, Councilperson Botel was saying move to approve, and then there was a second. I don't know if you want to parse that out and figure out who's proper or who's recognized.
I believe Councilman Botel made a motion to approve the item. Councilman simultaneously made a motion to deny the item. We have a second from Councilwoman Miller Anderson for, I'm assuming, Councilwoman Botel. Councilwoman Miller Anderson?
Yes.
Attorney Nguyen or Madam Clerk, there was a motion that was made simultaneously.
Well, I think it's
Nobody
on
was,
you, Mr.
neither
Chair.
were I'm
It's on
sorry?
you to make the
Yep,
decision
I'm
of
finishing
who
my
you
statement,
recommend.
Councilman. Thank you. So to that point, being that it was a simultaneous motion, there were both being recognized at the same time. We're going to go with recognizing Councilwoman Botel, who was the first person I heard, because Councilman McCoy didn't finish his statement, and seconded by Councilwoman Miller Anderson. Councilman McCoy, you had comments?
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a Ms. Nguyen item.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Nguyen, it's very unusual. This is an agreement not to exceed $84,000, and I'm not sure what that means. So if this person comes in to work tomorrow, do they get the whole $84,000? Or do they have to work over a period of time because there's no hourly rate set forth in this agreement or this extension, and the original agreement is not here. So, just in being diligent about this is not proper for us to vote on simply because I don't know what this person's hourly rate is. And-
Yes, I can tell you that the hourly rate is
Well-
$75 an hour. And I should have uploaded the original agreement, and I did not. I just uploaded the amendment. But this is the same agreement that we've had, other than the amount change, with Ms. Gamble for the last 4 years.
Right, but I think all we do is approve agreements, and there's no way of me knowing or being able to recall exactly what that amount is. But, everything about this item, I think, doesn't satisfy enough. If we're going to spend $84,000, we don't know, as policymakers and those that's charged with governance and authorizing contracts and payments, whether this represents she'll be working for 4 months or 4 days or 4 hours, maybe even 4 minutes. So I don't like this item in the form that it's presented. Is this time sensitive? Can this be brought back at a different meeting?
It is time sensitive because there are no budgeted funds for her to continue.
That doesn't really help me, does it? And
But I
mean,
will
as much
tell
as
you that she does invoice us. She bills us hourly. I approve those invoices. And so it is not a full payment of $84,000.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Nguyen, for your explanation. And as much as I appreciate the services Ms. Gamble provides to the office, I, in good faith, can support this item. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman. And any other colleagues? Attorney Nguyen, I did have the same sentiments and concerns because I just didn't understand the renewal and the time frame from the discussion of renewing it for 1 year. It's not completely outlined here with the amendment to the contract. I believe she's starting, when does her contract expire, is the question I had.
This is a one-year contract.
When did the last one expire?
I do not have that in front of me, but I want to say that it was either like earlier this month. It's either July 1st or June 1st or July 1st, but I'm not sure and I don't have it in front of me.
And if this does not pass, what happens next in regards to services by Ms. Campbell? Would she still just be being billed the agency, or would we not utilize her services?
I would manager and Mr. Sherman regarding if there's another way to pay her, but no, I don't think so.
Thank you, Attorney Nguyen.
You're welcome.
So,
Councilman
Mr.
McCoy, go
Chair,
ahead.
if you have reservations, I would see if we could, if you're not going to support this item, perhaps we should pull it, right? And let Ms. Nguyen have some sort of interim payment plan done through the manager's authority.
I would actually agree with that item, with that statement, to just see what payment plan and what options we have to move forward with those services so that the services are still met and payment can still be made.
We could enter into a contract under the manager's authority.
So instead of voting this down, colleagues, would we have the interest from the dais to pull this item?
That's my sentiments, because clearly, I mean,
I would agree.
there's not enough backup here.
Let the record reflect, Councilwoman Shirley Lanier is on the dais. So to proceed, we can vote this item up or down or pull the item. Councilman McCoy, you've made a motion to pull this item?
What?
It would be to delete.
Delete the item? Correct.
Well, you can take a substitute. And I don't want to do it. I'm looking for some feedback from the other members. I mean, obviously, we have a new member on the board. So, I mean, clearly, I think the attorney agreed that this could be refined a little bit more as to what that hourly rate looks like. But I don't want to put a motion out there if the board members are going to decide to, go otherwise. But, I mean, even considering the attorney's recommendation.
Sure.
Councilwoman Miller Anderson, go ahead.
Well, prior to Ms. Lanier coming in, I mean, it might have failed if you're assuming the two of us may have said yes and you all said no. So if you want to put a motion out there to withdraw it or delete it, or I'm fine with that.
Mr. Chair, you currently have a motion on the floor from Dr. Botel, so Dr. Botel would have to withdraw her motion, and then
Correct.
you all could proceed however you like.
Councilman Botel, would you like to proceed?
I would. I'm satisfied with the explanation we've received from our counsel, and I'm prepared to vote yes on this, so I think we
Thank
can
you.
proceed.
Colleagues? Councilwoman Lanier, we are on 3D consent, the legal contract. Madam Clerk?
Yes, Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
No.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
No.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, with both Chairperson Lawson and Councilperson McCoy dissenting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Moving on to 11C. We're taking 11C now, being that the item was moved to consent and then pulled from consent. Madam Clerk?
Resolution number 75-23, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, authorizing a work order for Alfonso Hernandez Architect in the amount of $58,250 for architectural work for the renovations of Tate's Gym, authorizing the city manager to approve change orders up to 10%, authorizing the director of finance to make payment for same and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do not have any public comment cards on 11C, and the acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Motion to approve resolution number 75-23.
Second.
Thank you. The motion been made and brought. Please second. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I could have the Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Richard Blankenship, available to answer any questions that the board may have consistent with this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Blankenship?
Good evening, Chair, Council, Richard Blankenship, and I'll take any questions you may have about this item.
Thank you. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blankenship, thank you for bringing this item. Just a few things. Number one is this seemed to have been solicited in 2020. Has there been any other work that's been done by this firm for the city? Because I've never seen this company before.
This firm was one of the 6 of the pool that was selected in 2020, and they have yet to do any work for the city. This is a small, by comparison, this is a small job. So since they were selected, they were in the pool but had not been selected, we felt like they were a good group to get with to do this architectural work.
Oh, that's exactly what I was afraid of, Mr. Blankenship. So we just figured we'd give everybody a shot, not without any regard of the qualifications of the firms that specialize in this, because I wanted to know exactly how we chose and landed on this firm when there was a RFP and no consideration of the others. Did you make that decision or did our city engineer make it?
No, we collectively made it. They just finished doing is it Paradise City in West Palm Beach, their gymnasium. They've done gym work before, so they seem to be very qualified to do this work.
Follow up.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Can you elaborate on we selected them? Who was-
Procurement, I'm sure the city engineer, we spoke with a group. So it was a collective decision.
Okay. And this was bidded out to them, or I guess this was
In
farmed
2020.
out to them and they gave us a quote back?
We asked for a proposal back. Yes.
And this was only offered to that firm?
Yes.
Okay. And the other firms were not qualified to do this?
They were qualified, but they were getting work from the city.
I'm sorry?
They were qualified, but they were getting work from the city. And this could have been too small for some of those larger firms.
I don't understand what you mean they were getting work from the city.
Again, of the 6 that were selected, there were many more that bid. Of the 6 that selected, this firm was the only one that had not received any work in the 3 years.
This is really tough for me. It really is. The last item as well as this, our rationalization for selecting someone because they didn't get work from the city just sounds bizarre to me.
No, let me be clear. They've done gym work before locally.
Yeah, but Mr. Blankenship, you have 6 that were selected in this 2020 RFP, and you're saying that you selected, is it, I don't want to say it wrong, Hernandez?
Alfonso Hernandez Architects.
Only because
We didn't pull them out of a hat. We met
well,
with
that's
them,
what
we
it sounds
discussed
like.
it.
I mean, you might as well
Well,
pull it out of a hat
No,
because
no, we didn't pull them out of a hat. We had discussions with them. We met on site. We walked the property. We looked at their work they did in West Palm. I was confident that they were a good selection.
okay. Respectfully, I need something better than that, right? Do you have something from our city engineer that would support this? Because you just selecting, and I certainly think you're a consummate professional, but you're the Parks and Rec director. Your explanation was because they've never gotten any work from us, so they were going to give them an opportunity, as opposed to someone in the professional engineering background that can offer me, this is the best firm, provided the scope of the proposal.
The city engineer was involved in all discussions.
Okay, thank you. Well, and Mr. Chair, well, that should have been the explanation, not
My
we chose
apologies
them
for
because.
not oversimplifying it. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
Mr.
I'm not going to support it either way because I mean, you got to, I just hate that we sit here and make these kind of decisions with not enough information, or like this last item, we don't even know what this person is making. We are fiduciary agents. We've complete financial disclosures that many of the administration and staff do not do. So that responsibility lies on us. And I want to take that very serious when it comes to this. So I just don't want to pick anybody because we haven't selected them. I hope that it should be our motto, right? The best city in which to live, work, and play, that we choose the best and brightest when it comes to procuring services and products. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, with respect to the shelter market and those that participate in the competitive selection process, what we can do to ensure that there is no ambiguity or confusion, we can ask for proposals from those in that particular sheltered market. So if they choose to respond, obviously they're interested, and then it's a decision based on who is invariably the best and capable entity to effectively do the work. So that's something that staff could easily institute as part of their process and make sure that that's memorialized in the memorandum to provide any clarity for the board moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And those were my sentiments in the agenda review. The sheltered market process of making sure that it's fair for everyone that had an opportunity to bid on these items. And I understand with Mr. Blankenship's explanation during that process that he wanted everybody in the shelter market to have an opportunity. But as Councilman McCoy stated, that we're not sure if this is the absolute best qualified individual out of the 6 businesses to do this work for this project. So regardless, we want to give everybody an opportunity with our sheltered markets, but we also want to make sure we're getting the best product and quality. So I would agree with Councilman McCoy in these sentiments. Colleagues? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Mill Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
No.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier,
No.
Chairperson Lawson.
No.
That vote failed, Mr. Chair, with only Councilperson Botel and Councilperson Mill Anderson voting in favor of it.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So let's do this, right? Because this is of urgent nature, right? I am okay with authorizing engineering work, but is there a way, Ms. Wynn, Mr. Evans, that we can authorize someone at the selection of our city engineer from the 5 remaining that doesn't have to come back before us?
I don't know how you do that when it's over the manager's authority and you don't have a name. I think we have to bring it back.
Councilman?
So this
Go
is
ahead.
exactly why I don't like to deal with half-baked items. And this puts me in a position where, as much as I know how important that gymnasium is, and we have kids over there that's utilizing it for summer camp, what do? Right? I really don't want to hold out what has to happen. What's our timeline, Mr. Blankenship?
Oh, we're in our first extension now. This is a grant-funded project.
Hard place.
Mr. Evans, if you could give us a timeline, being that there are 6 businesses in this sheltered market that would need to vet, identify, and process a proposal for this bid, what timeline would we have to kind of address that? And Mr. Blankenship, if you could after that address how long we have in our first extension for this grant.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
with respect to how quickly contractors or vendors would respond, we're at the mercy of what their availability is and their time to put that forward. As Director Blankenship communicated, some of them may not be interested in the work. Some of them may have prior commitments. So we would have to it would be my recommendation that you set a definitive timeline that says within 2 weeks we need to have, or within 7 days, we need to have your intent to, or a proposal for you to effectively do this work so we can facilitate moving it forward and then obviously bringing it back. But that, if we left it open-ended, we're solely at the mercy of those contractors and, what their timeline is to submit back to us.
So follow up to that, Mr. Evans, and before you go, Mr. Blankenship, my concerns with the item is that I want every one of the sheltered market businesses to have the opportunity. So sending the proposal out to them and seeing if we can get this back on the agenda by next month's meeting. I believe we're not having our first meeting in July, so the second meeting, if we can have this back on the item. whether it's the same firm or any of the other ones to respond. The scope of work should be the same, but I believe Councilman McCoy also would want to see the engineers reviewing, our city engineer reviewing this process. So if we could have this back on the agenda by next month, whether it's the same firm or a different firm, so that we can get started on the work as soon as possible, but we do want it properly vetted and cooked. Mr. Blankenship, you said the comment was, or I'm sorry, the question was in reference to the this first extension you said we're in.
Right.
How long do we have?
6 months, then we're allowed up to 3 extensions, I believe. Most of this work is windows, doors, storm windows and doors, ADA upgrades. The storm windows and doors could be a lengthy, order time, so it'll
And
be crunch.
with the summer camp going on, the work would be going on while the kids are there?
This is just
No, we wouldn't, the architectural work would be, but the construction wouldn't start for a little later,
Okay,
after the architectural work is done.
okay. So we do have some time for that. So it's 6 months for the grant. So as long as we have this in and start the work within and approve within these next 6 months, the grant will still apply
Yes.
to this. Thank you, Mr. Blankenship. Those are my concerns. Colleagues? Thank you. Madam
Thank you.
Clerk, regular agenda. I'm sorry, we're actually on awards and presentations, 6A.
Mr. Chair, before you go to 6A under number 5, petitions and communications for filing, we do have a petition that was filed today on behalf of the homeowners of Long Pine. So I do have a copy of it here. We received it today in the office.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yes, presentation 6A is of the city's audit for 2021 through 2022. We do have a public comment card on this item. The acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I can have the Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Mr. Randy Sherman, to introduce our presenters from HCT to provide you with the annual audit. Mr. Sherman.
Welcome back, Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. Again, Randy Sherman, Finance Director. Yes, every year, as you know, we're required to have an external audit on our financial statements. Once that audit has been completed and presented to the city, we bring the auditor forward to make that a presentation to the elected officials, take any questions or comments. Tonight, we have Mr. Roderick Harvey from HCT to present the fiscal 2022 audit.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon, Mr.
Chair,
Evans.
Pro Tem, Commissioners, City Manager, City Attorney. My name is Roderick Harvey with HCT. We are the CPA firm of record. We will be presenting the audit results for September 30, 2022. We are pleased to provide our audit results, which based on our audits over the year, our various compliance and audit procedures, we are issuing an unmodified or a clean report, and our audit report date is as of June 14, 2023. Over the next few minutes, we will talk about the audit results. We'll go over some supplementary slides and responsibilities. Our role as the auditor is to issue an opinion on the financial statements. We make our initial assessments. There were no changes to our assessments. And as you can see, we issue all of the appropriate audit reports. There are no outstanding matters, and all significant accounting policies and procedures are noted in Note 1 of the financial statements. We deemed significant areas of accounting estimates to be depreciation, fair value of investments, fair value of pensions, also significant risk areas, management override, revenue recognition, and there are several pronouncements that are out there, GASB 84, GASB 88, and GASB 90, but they did not have a direct and significant impact on the audit for the city of Riviera Beach. Uncorrected misstatements, there are none to report. Any corrected misstatements was discussed and deemed or discussed if it needed to be adjusted, and we have no financial presentation or disclosures omissions to report. Control deficiencies, none. Related party, no significant findings or issue. And the last portion of it just deals with if our or the financial statements, AFCR, is used in another document, for example, a bond offering, we, HCT, would need to be aware of that additional use of the ACFR. This next slide talks about several things that we are required to report to you as the elected officials or those charged with governance. And so we do it in a way that is a flashcard. And as you can see, we have no significant matters to report. I would just go over some of the highlights: illegal acts, going concern, other findings, significant issues, no disagreements with management, and none issues with management consulting other accountants. And so we have no issues to report as required by the AICPA. We are deemed independent. We will spend a few minutes going over some of the various slides as relates to the comparison between last year and this year. So if you will allow a few minutes. So we'll start with revenues. Revenues, again, comparing the 2021 year to 22. Revenues 152.8 million for the year ended 22, as compared to 148.6 million for the same year ended 21. Major revenue sources were tested for existence, accuracy, and cutoff as relates to expenses. Again, for the year 2022, 111.8 million as compared to 133.7 million. The decrease was mainly due to decreases in governmental spending. As it relates to expenses, we tested significant transactions for completeness, accuracy, cutoff, and the presentation of those expenses. Capital assets, the balance as of 2022, 267.8 million as compared to 248 million for the same period, 2021. The increase of 19.8 million is primarily due to Park Street water and sewer improvements. Receivable balance, again, for the 22 year, 12.8 million as compared to 11.5 million. The balances were confirmed by us doing our audit testing. Long-term debt for the period September 2022, 198.4 million as compared to 202.1 million. And again, we confirm those balances with independent third parties. Our responsibility is to express an opinion based on our audit and also to evaluate the internal control environment. There are several types of deficiencies that could or may exist. One of those types is a significant deficiency. A significant deficiency or combination of deficiencies is less severe than a material weakness, yet important enough to merit the attention of those charged with governance. A material weakness is a combination of deficiencies such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement in the entity's financial statements may not be prevented, detected, or corrected on a timely basis. As it relates to our findings for the current year, we have no current year findings. We are also required by the AICPA to give a status update on prior findings. I will move through the findings relatively quickly and give our status. So the 2019.7 material finding, we note that finding as partly implemented. Moving forward to the 2019-11 finding, that finding we deem implemented. Also the finding for 2019-12 as implemented. The finding going back to 2019-014, that finding is also implemented. As relates to finding 2021, that finding is partially implemented. And 2020-05, that one is also partially implemented. 2020-06, partially implemented. And the last finding, which goes back to last year, 2021-01, is implemented. The next several slides talks about the division of responsibilities. Again, as your auditors, our responsibility is to audit and issue of opinion. Management responsibility is to design, implement, and maintain a control environment. Also, management is responsible to provide access to us, the auditors, providing additional information requested and allow us to perform our audit. The elected officials are those charged with governance. Their responsibility is oversight of the internal controls environment such that those controls allow for a design that will prevent, deter, or detect fraud. This last slide just talks about we have a responsibility as your auditors to communicate with you in writing or verbally any issues that we may find. For example, if there's any issues within not following laws or regulations, or we withdraw from the engagement or any other findings, we have a responsibility to report those findings to you, the elected officials or those charged with governance. At this time, Chair Lawson, if there is time, we will entertain any questions that there may be.
Do we have any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have one public comment card.
Thank you. If we can hear the public comments.
Yes, Mr. Fane Lozman.
Mr. Harvey. Yeah, you can have a seat right there, Mr. Harvey. Thank you.
Thane Lozman, Singer Island. Back in 2004, Liz Wade reached out to the Auditor General of the state of Florida. And the Auditor General of the state of Florida did an audit of the city from October 1st, 2004 to November 30th, 2005. And they prepared a report in 2007. The report number was 2007-075. I'm not satisfied with the audit. I've talked many times about how Riviera Beach is a cesspool of political corruption. Money that the taxpayers spend, I'm a major tax holder, a property owner in Singer Island, is squandered, is spent fraudulently, and an outside auditor is not going to pick that up. That has to be done by the state of Florida. For example, what do you mean fraudulently? We had a city manager paid $430,000 in 2020. With a contract that was only worth, his written contract was $220,000. We have Sammy Brown right there in the audience. A 19-year-old kid was paid $65,000 and he wasn't qualified to be Botel's administrative assistant. This gentleman is not going to be able to come up with, he doesn't understand the fraudulent aspects of what went on, but in the Auditor General report in 2007, they came in and they looked at, can you do that? Can you pay a city manager $430,000 more than the President of the United States? Can you pay a kid who didn't graduate high school and was required to do 3 years of high school $65,000? We need to reach out to the Auditor General like Liz Wade did back in 2004 and have the state of Florida do an audit and go through all the waste and fraud that's happening in the city's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Lozman. Comments from the board? Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Harvey,
Yes, sir.
I have a few questions, about 5 or 6, maybe 12, 15. You went through your slides pretty quickly, and I did get the May 8th letter concluding your audit work that you provided to those charged with governance, but we didn't have anything as detailed as the slides. But I do want to ask you some questions because I have some things that I was expecting to see in the audit that I didn't see. So number one, what authority is it that requires you to report those prior year findings? Because we're still dealing with 2019 findings and we're in 2022. That's 3 years now.
So there are 2 levels of authority that require us as the external auditors to report. One is the Auditor General of the state of Florida also requires us, which we issue a report, which is in your AFCR, to go back and assess any prior comments. And then also GAS, Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, requires that we look at prior year comments and update them as a part of our auditing procedures.
Thank you. I shared with you by email specifically concerns I had because you send out or at least your office provides every elected official and probably members of administration with conflict of interest forms and related party transaction forms. Mm-hmm. And it also provides for a fraud risk questionnaire.
Correct.
Help me out with this because I specifically responded. Actually, I believe I provided your office with 2 forms this year, one indicating I didn't have any conflict of interest, but others raising issues of fraud. And I can point out about 3 instances that I raised issues of fraud, and I did not see that as management findings. However, you presented us a slide. It was considered audit results. And if you could go back to it or tee it back up, that'd be great so we can kind of follow along. But I specifically pointed out, I want to say definitely 2, but possibly 3 separate independent items that were not consistent with our procurement code, and yet there's no findings. And I don't think, and I even provided backup documentation. So I pretty much made the work very easy. So I'll go through the first one. Back in 2022, City Manager Evans entered into a contract with Blueprints for Safety. Specifically in that contract, Blueprints for Safety indicated that this investigation shall not exceed $25,000. We will do this for $25,000. Yet and still it came in close to $80,000, right?
Yes, sir.
The manager does not have that authority to enter into a contract above $25,000. That's a function according to 16.5 of our Code of Ordinances under our procurement section that provides for that to be solicited, and it has to be decided upon by the city council. Do you recall me sharing that with you?
Yes, I do recall.
All right, thank you. So my question is, Mr. Harvey,
Yes, sir.
you require me as an elected official to lay out what I believe are areas of concern, potential fraud, possibly risk, possibly violations of some sort of non-compliance with laws and regulations, but yet I didn't see it a part of your audit results when clearly that item that was voted on by 3 members of the board was in conflict or in contradiction of our own Code of Ordinances. Can you explain to us why that didn't reach your management findings? And if you did review it, what was your analysis of it?
Okay. You ready for my answer?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And so thank you, Councilman, for your diligence in reporting back to us. We did follow up on that matter, and we came to a couple conclusions. The overarching is that, yes, the policy was offended. It was.
I don't know what that means, offended.
The policy was not maintained. And so in other words, it appears that the expenditure of $25,000 was exceeded based on the initial review, right? What we did was look to see if the error was or is pervasive. And what that means is it more than one occurrence, or has it permeated the organization? We could not tell based on our questions, based on our inquiries, if it was pervasive. And since the comment was not deemed to be pervasive, then we did not write it as a finding, a written finding. But we did follow up on it. We did review everything you sent, plus requested additional documentation on the item. We did note that the amount was brought back to the elected officials and was approved at the 86 or 87,000. And so we noted it and we concluded that it should not be a written comment because we only noted one instance and we did not see several instances where we could extrapolate an error rate back to the population.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you for that explanation. Mr. Harvey, but when I went back and I looked at those findings, and specifically the finding regarding P card purchases or P card usage by the elected officials, I don't believe that that was pervasive. However, that's been in your management findings now for 3 years that we've seen that up there. And the other part of it, which is not for you, is I don't understand how my members of my board can sit here and vote for something that is not complete on its face when we have issues about our processes and internal controls that are not being followed and is not being implemented even 3 years after it was discovered. That's not after it occurred, after it was discovered. So can you please explain the portion as to
the P card issue? Let me give a little background. So we as external auditors, we audit citywide. we are required to consider not only our own findings, but findings from other organizations. And one of those organizations is the state of Florida, whether it's the Florida organization or the local, that reviews the Auditor General or the Inspector General. And if my memory is correct, the P card issue was an issue that was put forth by the Palm Beach Auditor General. And so because of that, we picked it up and put it into our audit report. And so the comment has remained. There has been.
Excuse me, Mr. Harvey, I apologize. If everyone in the room can please silence their phones. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you for that. So we followed up on the comment, or included the comment, because it was in a written report from the Auditor General from Palm Beach County, and we followed up. We've seen some progress, but we don't believe that item is completely cured. I would also suggest to the listener that our responsibility as auditor is to audit and report. And so responsibility should fall to management or elected to implement what is deemed to be significant or important.
Okay, so we can just have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 fraud and misappropriation, so that'll never arise to something that you'll put in your report. So that's basically what I'm hearing from you.
We have a certain level of materiality that does not go down to that level. So a $3,000 or $4,000, I wouldn't say fraud issue, would not rise to our level, but any fraud would. If we found fraud, we have a responsibility to report fraud to you as the elected officials. If it's fraud, the biggest issue with fraud is intent. And so it's very difficult usually to say it's fraud, but we certainly can bring issues. And I think we have over the last few years in our audit reports of things that should be considered by those charged with governance.
Follow up. And I appreciate your analysis of that, but I wasn't speaking in terms of suggesting that was fraud, because I had 3 board members that actually ratified the vote to approve that $80,000 payment, which actually was in conflict of their oath of office. So I don't understand why you're suggesting fraud. I didn't really point because I never seen it come back up to the screen, but I was specifically referring to the section of audit results that speaks to non-compliance with laws and regulations. So I'm not suggesting that it was fraud, but if we have a code, if we have a set of rules that we have to follow, we should follow it. Like elected officials going out to eat on their P card with them and their families, like that kind of issues, I don't expect to be in the report. Even before you, Mr. Harvey, I shared this information with our internal auditor when we did have one. And I'm afraid to say nothing ever happens with it. So I'm almost in line with the other gentleman that got up and spoke. It's like, I'm not perfect, but I can tell you I'm going to commit to following the rules. And I don't appreciate that when we get in these meetings and we get something presented towards us that's not exactly compliant with our own code and our own rules. We violate our oath of office when we vote on something that we know is not proper. And clearly what happened today with that contract, it may not rise to the level of being improper or, in your words, offend, or the code wasn't maintained, but certainly we are fiduciary agents, and I would appreciate, right, if we take this serious. And I feel like I got burned on this, Mr. Harvey, and you might be wondering why I say that. Don't send me a conflict of interest letter asking me areas of concern. When I get it, you basically, in your professional role, suggest that it's de minimis and not worth reporting, because I take this very serious. If an employee pulled that, and I told this to administration yesterday, if an employee pulls some of the stuff that I see that occurs with elected officials in administration, not only they be out of a job, they likely be arrested. So, I just got issues with it, and I'm not here for fanfare. I'm really not, because if you don't know McCoy, I'm a straight shooter, right?
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Harvey, I appreciate your work, but I think you need to be clear on one thing about what that materiality means. If that's not your role to get in here, because I know we had this issue back in maybe 2018 or 2017 regarding overpayments of insurance, and for some reason, there's this notion that should have been discovered by you. Should it have been something that you would have identified in your regular course of doing sampling and testing?
That issue, going back to the HR issue, would not, because it was an approved expenditure. It was authorized, and that level of testing we would not do on a normal case. unless there's an issue. But I want to go back to a bigger issue you said, you mentioned. And first of all, say that we do not take any comment from any elected official, department head, as a de minimis comment. I would also remind gently that we did follow up on a comment. We did rise to an audit level where we spent time and audit effort on what you put forth. I will also suggest or remind that there's two ways that we can report. We can report by written document, and we can also report verbally. And so I would suggest to anybody, to the listener, that we have reported on that issue verbally today because we've raised it in this meeting today. And so we have done our responsibility, in my mind, by allowing the elected officials to hear from us, not only by written document, but also by voice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have. I mean, I had more, but I don't want to monopolize.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues?
Figures.
Mr. Harvey?
Thank you so
Figures,
much.
Thank you
Mr.
for the
Chair.
presentation.
Yes.
Mr. Evans? Item 8A. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, item 8A.
Ordinance number 4230, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending Chapter 31 of the Code of Ordinance entitled Zoning, creating Section 31-9, entitled Reasonable Accommodation Procedures, providing for severability and conflicts, and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do have public comment cards on this item. Any acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Thank you.
Motion to approve ordinance number 4230.
Second.
Thank you. The motion's been made and properly second. Mr. Evans? Madam Ms. Miller-Anderson?
Can we find out how many public comment cards we have?
Madam Clerk, how many public comments cards do we have this?
Yes, on this item, you have two.
We have 2 public comment cards?
Yes, just for this item, though.
Thank you. Ms. Miller-Anderson?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, at this time, if I can have the Director of Development Services, Mr. Clarence Sermons, to make this presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Sermons?
Good evening. I'm going to start the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
No problem. For the record, my name is Deirdre Jacobs. I'm the Assistant City Manager here with the City of Riviera Beach. This is a staff-initiated text amendment wherein we'll be proffering to the board as a part of an ordinance on second and final reading. It deals with issues with persons with disabilities, wherein they would be able to have a process for a committee to approve or deny requests that deal with things that might be considered discriminatory with regards to their disabilities. Mr. Sermons has a presentation that he's going to present to you that'll provide more details with regards to this particular amendment to our code.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Good evening again, Mr. Chair. Again, Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services. Again, this is a staff-initiated text amendment that would create a process that would comply with FHA or the Fair Housing Act, as well as ADA or the Title II of the Americans with Disability Act. It creates a process within the city's land development code to provide individuals with disabilities or developers of housing for people with disabilities flexibility in the application of land use and zoning and building regulations, policies, practices, and procedures, or even waiving certain criteria when it is necessary to eliminate barriers to housing opportunities. This ordinance does remain as was presented on first reading, and staff is happy to answer any additional questions that there may be on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Sermons. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Madam Clerk, if we can have the public comments, please.
Yes, first we'll have Joyce Murphy and then Fane Lozman.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you. Next will be Mr. Fane Lozman.
Fane Lozman, Singer Island. I'm going to tell you a brief story about how I got involved in fighting political corruption. It had to do with the ADA Act. When I lived in North Bay Village on my floating home, my neighbor was a World War II vet, and they refused to allow him to put a wheelchair ramp from the dock to his floating home that I was paying for. We investigated the marina operator. He had an improper relationship with an elected official. We got that guy arrested, and then we got 3 more elected officials arrested. 4 out of the 5 elected officials in North Bay Village were removed by the state attorney based on what started with a wheelchair ramp. Okay? This city doesn't give a damn about the ADA. Okay? There's a federal law that said the ADA must be followed. Okay? I was in a bad accident. They never caught the guy, ran me over, had a bunch of screws. I've been asking for an ADA accommodation to have electricity on my property. Have electricity for cameras, because my property is constantly getting vandalized on Singer Island, and have electricity for a little portable ice machine. Sherman said no. Your code enforcement officer said no. And Christy Godot, your outside counsel, said no. You can't have an ADA accommodation. You don't like it, file a federal lawsuit. You shouldn't have to file a federal lawsuit in this city for an ADA accommodation for anybody. Okay, you have a city manager, where is he at? He just hides in his office, he won't deal with it. Okay, why in the 2023 are we dealing with the ADA Act? If somebody comes forward and says, I need an accommodation for electricity for my property, for a medical condition, you can produce doctor's paperwork saying you need it, they have to give it to you, not like, oh, well, we're gonna go hire an outside counsel and fight you from getting electricity. I wanna know how many tens of thousands of dollars, there's really hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been fought over putting electricity on my property and putting a fence to keep trespassers out. I'm the only guy in the state of Florida can't have a fence, and I'm probably the only guy in the state of Florida can't have electricity for a reasonable accommodation. There needs to be some accountability with this man right there, Sermons, with Jonathan Evans, that they are targeting people like myself, when it comes to an ADA accommodation. That's why we need to have some kind of oversight as to what's going on with Evans and Sermons. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lozman. Madam Clerk?
That concludes public comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, colleagues, board members? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel?
Yes.
Councilperson Mel Anderson?
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson?
Yes.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Item 8B.
Item 8B, just so you're aware, we do have 16 public comment cards for this, 18, I'm sorry, 2
18?
more coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair,
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
do we interrupt this item to come back to public comments, which is gonna start in about 10, 12 minutes or so? Or more like 15 minutes, or what?
Well, I believe we move forward with this item. We'll start public comment right after, being that it's 7:13. We do have 16, you said?
We have 18 now.
18? Yeah, let's go ahead and get started with this item first. Dispose of this item and then go into public comment.
Can we ensure that none of those that believe they're on for public comments doesn't really intend to be for Lone Pine or Carrington Pines?
These are all marked for item 8B.
Okay, but I'm speaking of our public comments section. Have we ensured that those individuals don't have the intent, because many times there's confusion on those cards? Because I see more than 16.
If they put in more, some people have put in more than one card to speak on more than one item. So if they put in one for 8B and they put in one for general comments, they'll be called for both. Does that answer the question?
No,
Okay.
it didn't. I just don't want anybody to jump up and say, well, I wanted to speak on that item, and they don't get called. That's all I'm simply asking you to double check.
Well, we have 5 for public comments and 18 for item 8B.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 4221, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving the application ZA 20-02 from Wantman Group Incorporated, WGI, requesting a zoning map amendment from an RO, Recreation Open Space District designation, to a R-PUD, Residential Plan Unit Development District designation, forming approximately 63.58 acres, parcel of land formerly known as Lone Pine Golf Course, with postal address 6251 North Military Trail, Riviera Beach, Florida, identified by parcel control number 5642423607000010, providing for severability, repeal of laws in conflict, codification, and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, as I stated before, we do have public comment cards on this item, and the acceptance of public comment cards are now closed.
Motion to approve ordinance number 4221.
Second.
Thank you. Motion been made and properly second. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, if I can have the Director of Development Services, Mr. Clarence Sermons, to make this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Again, for the record, I'm Deirdre Jacobs, the Assistant City Manager here with the City of Riviera Beach. This particular project deals with about 4 different areas, but we're going to start off with their first application, which deals with the zoning change. Mrs. Christy Godot is here from Tercivia Law. She's the outside counsel that has been assisting us to make sure that the process is being handled properly. So she's going to start by apprising the public and the council and the mayor of the process that we're asking to be used as we go through the particular application process.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, council members, and Mr. Mayor. My name is Christy Gatto. I'm here to talk to you about the 4 items that you have before you this evening for Carrington Pines. I'm just going to talk about them generally first because there are 4 items. As you may recall, I was before you on first reading for the first 2 items. The first item you're hearing tonight, which was just read into the record by the clerk, is the rezoning of this property. That is by ordinance, and we're here for second reading. The second item on the agenda is the change of the land use designation, which is actually an amendment to your future land use map and your comprehensive plan. That is also by ordinance on second reading. The other 2 items, the plat application and the site plan, are the follow-on items, and those are by resolution, so obviously only 1 reading. But what I want to address specifically is this first item, the rezoning. As I mentioned when I was here last time, procedurally, this is a legislative decision because this rezoning is tied to the change that's required in the comprehensive plan. And as you all know, in order for you to change your rezoning, it's got to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So right now you have to do both of these in order to rezone this property. So these are legislative decisions because anytime you change your comprehensive plan, the state of Florida, the courts have declared it's a legislative decision by this board. That's as opposed to being a quasi-judicial decision. It's left up to your legislative decision-making power. That also applies to the comprehensive plan amendment. It is a legislative decision. I do want to point out that for this rezoning, it is going to require that 4 out of the 5 council members vote in favor. And the reason for that is the city has received a zoning protest that Mr. Sermon's department has confirmed meets the standard under section 31-5 of your land development code, that it is a valid protest. And once they reach 20% or more of the adjacent property owners signing off on that petition to challenge the rezoning, it requires a 3/4 vote, which means 4 out of 5 have to vote in favor of approving this rezoning. So again, a legislative decision requires 4 out of 5 to vote in favor of approving it. If there are any procedural questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godot.
Oh, is this the opportunity to ask questions?
I'm here for sort of the procedural legal issue. So if you have a procedural legal issue, I'm happy to try and answer it.
So specifically,
Go ahead, Councilman.
thank you, Mr. Chair. The votes was 4 out of 5. Is that what called out in the code?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yes, under section 31-5 of your land development code, you have an old provision in there that used to be codified in Florida statute, and it allows for adjacent property owners within 500 feet of the property to be rezoned to submit a petition to challenge a rezoning. Such a petition has been submitted to the city in this case, and Mr. Sermon's office, as I said, has verified that that has been properly signed off by at least 20%. Therefore, it moves the voting from just a simple majority up to a 3/4 majority vote, which requires 4 out of 5.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Godot? Go ahead, Ms. Jacobs.
So at this particular time, we'd like to make a presentation to the board if it's your desire. Okay.
Please, thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Ms. Jacobs.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The property in question is before you on the screen. It is located at North Military Trail and Canterbury Drive North and Canterbury Drive South. The lot size is approximately 63.58 acres. The current use was formerly a golf course and an existing structure that served it. The proposed use is single-family dwelling units and townhomes. The existing land use is recreational. The proposed land use is single-family residential with 6 units per acre, as well as low-density, multiple-family residential to allow townhomes. The existing zoning is recreation open space, and the proposed zoning is residential planned unit development. Between April 2020 and May of 2022, this project received extensive review by staff of multiple city departments, third-party reviewers, and 3 other government agencies. That includes the Planning and Zoning, Buildings, Engineering, Public Works, the Utility Special District, the Fire Department, the Police Department, Ingenuity Group Incorporated related to platting reviews, the Florida Department of Transportation, Palm Beach County Traffic, and South Florida Water Management District. Throughout those reviews, all reviewers confirmed that all concerns have been addressed in their respective areas of discipline. This means that all relevant state, county, and city regulations have either been met, can be met, subject to construction permit approval.
Point of order.
Hold on, Mr. Sermons. Councilman
So-
McCoy, state your point.
I just want to be clear. We're talking about zoning, correct?
Correct.
So I'm going to raise a point of order because that's impertinent and it's not relevant to what we have before us. I want to deal with the zoning issue in itself. I'm not concerned with what other agencies are doing. That's not at this item. If he has a joint presentation, let's deal with the zoning issue first.
Thank you. Your point has been heard. And Mr. Sermons, if we can focus on item 8B, which is going to be exclusively on the zoning. I know you have a joint presentation we discussed, but we want to just discuss the zoning.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Levels of service are a consideration when it comes to zoning. Therefore, those aspects of the review have been mentioned here. I will be sure to keep all comments related to what is considered for staff's review for the zone change application.
Thank you, Mr. Sermons.
Yes.
Go ahead.
For public outreach, between October 2020 and May of 2023, the applicant held 9 community meetings and reported them to city staff. The list of those meetings, the formats and/or locations of them are on the screen before you. Additionally, the City of Riviera Beach held a community meeting regarding this project on August 31st, 2022. There were approximately 70 residents present at this city-hosted meeting. Public notice was executed to satisfy state and city regulations regarding this project, including mailer notices to the neighboring property owners. ads in the local newspaper of circulation, and signage posted on the property. So that completes the staff presentation on this item, and staff recommends that City Council move forward with considering this item.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Sermons. Questions for colleagues for staff? Attorney Nguyen, the process for tonight, if you can explain what we're going to be hearing before we have comments from the public,
Yes,
or
Ms.
Ms. Godot.
Yeah, she's coming forward. to do
Thank you,
that.
Attorney
Thank
Nguyen.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did fail to neglect that since it is a rezoning legislatively, as we did with first reading, we allow each presenter, staff, the applicant, and the party intervener 10 minutes to make their presentation. So now that staff has made its presentation, I believe it would be appropriate for the applicant, once the applicant makes their presentation, then to hear from the party intervener, and then hear from public comment.
In reference to their presentations, this will be in reference to the zoning.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Just
you,
strictly
Ms.
to the rezoning.
And for the applicant and the party intervener, just to be clear that we are discussing the zoning change. And then after we hear from those parties, we will hear from public comments and then have comments from the board.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
question for Ms. Godot.
Go ahead, Councilman.
So party intervener is called out in our code, but that speaks specifically to quasi judicial. But you're saying that this is legislative. Can you reconcile the two?
If I may, Mr.
I mean,
Chair.
because obviously, if you're going to utilize 31-4 to tell us about the protest, that's derived out of our code. So is the party intervener portion, which speaks in our code solely to quasi judicial. Not sure you can have it both ways.
Go ahead, Ms. Godot.
Okay, if I may respond.
Please.
Councilman McCoy, you are exactly correct in that normally with a quasi judicial proceeding where you have a higher sense of due process than you would in a legislative decision, that you would usually afford them the same opportunities as you would an applicant to a party intervener. What my legal recommendation is in legislative decisions is that you afford the same opportunity for just a presentation, because while as a legislative decision, the due process requirement may not be as high as a quasi judicial, you avoid that issue should they decide to challenge your decision in a court of law. So afford them the same opportunity you afford staff and you afford the applicant will eliminate an argument of due process. And that's why I make the same recommendation, whether it's legislative or quasi-judicial, give the parties that are primarily involved the same opportunity to make their presentation so you eliminate a due process argument. And if you, certainly that's just my legal recommendation. If you decide that you want to shorten the opportunity for the applicant or the party intervener, that's certainly your decision.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you for clarifying that. So 2-45 of our code and 2-47 is inapplicable only to the portion that the intervener is allowed. So there won't be any swearing in of witnesses. There won't be any cross-examination.
You are absolutely correct.
So will there be rebuttal?
We have discussed that, and there's no requirement for an opportunity of rebuttal in legislative. Thus, we thought that just giving everybody 10 minutes up front to make a presentation, and then once you move to the quasi-judicial items, the plat and the site plan, then the same 10 minutes would apply. If they want to use their full 10 minutes for a presentation, that's up to them, or if they want to save some time for rebuttal, that's certainly up to them. But yes, in quasi-judicial, we would offer them an opportunity to rebut should they choose to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And just for clarity's sake, for this item, the applicant will have 10 minutes. Will they be able to split their 10 minutes? Because you said there's no rebuttal for this. So we're just going to allow for them 10 minutes to present, and then we'll have the next party give 10 minutes to speak as well.
Correct. The applicant 10 minutes, and the party intervener 10 minutes, and then move to public comment, and then for your deliberations.
Thank you, Ms. Godot.
Can you, Mr. Chair?
Councilman, go ahead.
Can you provide the members of the board the standard of review and making our decision?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So with a legislative decision, the legal standard of review is whether the decision is fairly debatable. What the courts have said about that standard is it's basically if reasonable people can differ on your decision, meaning there's a rational relationship between your decision and, say, the general welfare of the city, then if rational people can debate it, then your decision should be upheld because it had a rational basis. With any rezoning, you've always got to make sure it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, but obviously the general welfare are within your domain of consideration as a legislative decision. So as long as your decision is fairly debatable and not arbitrary and capricious, it should be upheld if challenged in a court of law. As you know, that differs from a quasi-judicial decision where it's a different legal standard and a different type of challenge. It's an appellate challenge after a quasi-judicial decision. So it is a different legal standard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. And the time is at 7:30. We will be closing public comments. We'll be taking public comments immediately following this item for general public comments. Being that it's 7:30, we're in the middle of the item. If anyone has a card, please submit now. But we're closing public comments for the general public comments for after this item. So we will have Ms. Godot, the applicant, come to present for us now.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Hope Calhoun, Land Use Council for the applicant. Just a point of order, Mr. Mayor, excuse me, if I may, Councilperson Lawson. Your outside counsel specifically stated that a rezoning has to be consistent with the land use. In this case, on the agenda, you've placed the rezoning before the land use. So you could, in theory, deny our rezoning application and state you're denying it because it's inconsistent with the land use. Therefore, for due process purposes, we would ask that you would consider the land use application first and then the rezoning application to ensure that if the land use application passes, the rezoning application can then be considered to be consistent with the newly adopted and codified land use.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Calhoun. Attorney Nguyen.
Ms. Godot will answer this question.
Thank you.
Christy Gatto, Mr. Chair, to address that issue, she's correct that in the normal course of things, you would normally do your change in land use designation of your comprehensive plan first. However, with this type of rezoning, it is done in coordination with the comp plan amendment. So the two work together. So realistically, this rezoning cannot become effective until your comprehensive plan amendment becomes effective. And actually, your comprehensive plan amendment effectiveness is reliant on a state's process, whereas your rezoning is not. So in reality, yes, she's correct. And if this board's decision is to deny it based on your current land use designation, I would have an issue with that because she's correct. We don't want to base it on that because they're working together. So in summary, this can proceed, but if approved, it is conditioned upon the land use being approved as well. And that goes into a process beyond this board. So you can hear the rezoning first when two of these issues are tied together. If this board's denial is based on what currently exists in your land use designation, your comprehensive plan, I would agree with them that then we really shouldn't hear the rezoning until you make a decision on the land use change.
To that point of follow-up, if this board's decision to deny, can you please explain that?
if, on the rezoning, if you deny the rezoning, right, then there's a strong legal answer that you can't then approve a change in the land use designation because you'd be creating an inconsistency between your zoning and your comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan is your big picture for all development in the city. So out of your land use designations in the comprehensive plan, that flows down into your zoning, and your zoning implements the specific aspects of those land use designation. So there always has to be a consistency flowing down from your comprehensive plan. So you can't have an inconsistency between your comp plan and your rezoning. So if the decision is to deny your rezoning, then the next item on the comprehensive plan, from a purely legal standpoint, would have to be to deny too, because you would be creating an inconsistency. The reverse is also true. If we were to hear the land use first and that got denied, you would have to deny the rezoning because you couldn't have that inconsistency.
Okay, so,
So our position is that it really doesn't
So our
matter
posi-
what order you take it in, and you can continue with.
so that is my concern. The
Yes.
position of legal is that regardless of the order, the other would have to be denied based upon this process. But based on the comments from the speaker, the land use process should technically be going first.
But in this instance, it doesn't have to, because they both are dependent on each other. You can't approve one and
So they're both
deny
codependent
one and approve the
regardless.
other. They have to. Right.
So to that point, it's the pleasure of the board. Do we want to just continue with the presentation and keep it in order, or do we want to go to 8C? Which in turn, if we change and go to a different item, we're going to go into public comments first. So as the pleasure of the board, do we want to just continue with the presentation of 8B?
Yes, we can.
Continue?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Calhoun, if we can continue with your presentation from the
Excuse me.
applicant.
Excuse me,
And we can
Mr.
say-
Chair.
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to start. They're 10 minutes over because it just kind of got a little out of their control.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms.
Just for the
Keller.
record, our planner is going to do the technical presentation. You've already heard at first reading our very thorough presentation with regard to meeting all of the criteria. And staff also made that presentation this meeting, planning and zoning, and first reading. And I just want to state also for the record, from a due process standpoint, we do object to having the rezoning heard before the land use plan amendment, because it seems that we're kind of picking and choosing what applies in the code versus how it's applied and when.
With that, good evening, council, mayor, staff, and residents. For the record, Juan Machado, Senior Project Manager with WGI, on behalf of the applicant. Before you tonight is the adoption hearing for the comprehensive land use change from recreational open space to single-family residential and low-density multifamily residential, and the adjoining rezoning, and concurrent applications for the site plan and the plat. Subject property is a 63.5 acres as presented by staff, west of Military Trail, already known as the Lone Pine State Golf Course. This is the surrounding property uses as far as immediately to the west is the residential in nature, and to the east is commercial, a mixture of commercial and industrial. I'll go straight to the rezoning part of the application. The existing zoning, it is as stated, recreational open space. The application before you tonight is for the adoption of the previously approved on council hearing 1, the rezoning to residential planned unit development. All the items and sections of the code that needed to be met were provided to staff, were reviewed and transmitted, and have been found to be compliant. That concludes my presentation. I'll reserve any other time to rebuttal.
Thank you. Thank you. Very quickly, just to follow up before we would like to reserve some time for rebuttal. We were given a total of 10 minutes. We know that there are speakers. I believe the question was asked if we could do that. I believe that we have that opportunity to rebut after people speak. And
If
we'd
you give
like
us
to do
1
that.
minute, Ms. Calhoun, pause the time for me, Madam Clerk.
Right now, they have 7 minutes and 47 seconds left.
For clarity, I believe they asked this question earlier. Attorney Nguyen, or actually Ms. Godot. In regards to the rebuttal and the discussion, I believe that with this zoning item, with this ordinance, we are just going to give a 10-minute presentation from both parties.
That's correct.
Okay, so to that point, if you guys can use your full 10 minutes complete with your full presentation, and we'll allow the next party to do the same.
Okay, thank you. With regard to the rezoning, just a few things we're going to reiterate. Number one, the proposed rezoning is consistent with what is surrounding our community, is what is surrounding us. Secondly, again, as you have heard stated, we meet all of the criteria, and that's the judgment and the basis that you should use to decide whether or not this application should be consistent. Your zoning code lays out specific zoning criteria. We have addressed all of those, and we have been said to be compatible and compliant with all of those. Thirdly, with regard to the rezoning of the property, it should be noted that the request is to change the zoning from recreational and open space to residential PUD. We are not currently commercial. We are currently recreation and open space. It should be noted that the current permitted uses in recreation and open space are quite extensive. The current permitted uses under the recreational use category, just for the record: archery range, baseball, driving range, golf course, miniature golf course, shuffleboard, swimming pool, tennis courts, and other recreational uses. So for example, motocross could be considered a recreational use. For example, Topgolf is a recreational use. For example, rapid water parks is a recreational use. What we are trying to do is rezone the property to a use that is compatible with the areas that's surrounding us. So we would ask that, as you did on first reading, you would approve us on second reading to rezone the project so that we can put residential uses on the property, which are much less invasive and much more compatible than any of the other listed recreational uses available. I should also note that, again, we are the project applicant. We don't yet own the property. However, the owners have made it clear to us that, as far as we know, there have been no other offers to purchase the property for any other type of recreational or residential use at this time. You have an applicant who is before you, who has tried very hard to create an area that's compatible, again, with the existing residential community. We would ask that you would approve this rezoning application so that the continued use of the property can be consistent with what's in the area, as opposed to other recreational uses, not a golf course, because the golf course has been closed, as opposed to other recreational uses that could go on the property that are not compatible, or instead create more traffic, more noise, and are incompatible with the residential uses.
Excuse me, hold on one second. Excuse me, residents, if you can, please keep it down. The noise does travel. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Calhoun.
With that, we're happy to answer questions.
Thank you. How much time do we have, Ms. Tawana?
They have a total of 4 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Being that this is legislative, we can go ahead and ask the applicant questions before we bring in the next party. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Calhoun, you said compatible and consistent with what's around us. What does that mean?
That means that the existing, if you can see now from the existing zoning map, that the area in between, so we are the RPUD proposed. Thank you. The existing is RO. Around us, you will see directly adjacent is RS5, which is residential. To our north is RPUD, which is residential. And then across you have commercial. Across the street you have commercial. So what we're suggesting is, and to be clear, as I stated earlier, the other recreational uses that are permitted that are not a golf course, because the golf course has closed and is not going to reopen, are a lot less compatible with single-family residential homes. Instead, what we are proposing as RPUD, which would consist of single-family homes and townhomes, are consistent with the surrounding existing zoning categories.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Calhoun.
Thank you.
And Mr. Evans, our next speaker is the
The party intervener and
Party
the attorney
intervener.
for the party intervener. He
Excellent.
would introduce himself.
Good evening, council, staff. It's good to be back. I will try to not take the full 10 minutes. I know we spent a lot of time back in November talking about this project. But the first thing I want to make very clear.
Excuse me, if you could state your
I'm
name
so
for the
sorry,
for the
Steve
record.
Daniels, law firm of Saul Ewing. I am here on behalf of the Lone Pine Homeowners Association, Inc., which surrounds the subject property. The first thing I want to make very clear is we are requesting that the council not approve the application for reasons, not just the incompatibility, but for other reasons, notwithstanding the technical inconsistency with the comprehensive plan right now, although that might change later. We're asking you to please reject the application for other reasons in addition to that technical reason. So let me just summarize what we talked about when we were here in November. It's going to be a little different argument because we spent a lot of time then talking about a golf course. Golf course has been closed by the owner, which was his decision. He owns the property. He has that right. But I'll submit to you that that doesn't mean it won't be a golf course again. The fact that it's not a golf course now in an attempt to create facts on the ground that hopefully in their minds, the applicant, that the council will then catch up to facts on the ground is what's going on. That's the same reason that the applicant is putting the plat and the site plan on tonight's council meeting, when in fact those are usually done well after a rezoning and a comprehensive plan amendment change. So they're trying to create facts on the ground by having it no longer be a golf course. But I'll tell you, it's kind of nice. It's still green. The owner still has a responsibility, and I assume the city will work with the owner as well to keep it maintained, keep it clean, free of rodents, keep it mowed, because at the end of the day, having 63 acres of green space is not a bad alternative to having a golf course. But let's forget for a second whether it is or it isn't, it will be or won't be a golf course at some point in the future. Let's talk about the project itself. So what you have at Lone Pine Estates, and I'm assuming everybody's very familiar with it. I have to tell you, I have a very different impression of Lone Pine Estates after the August meeting, the November meeting, than I did before, and I'll tell you why. When I heard the various homeowners speak before the council, I can't tell you how impressed I was. This is the most perfect integrated neighborhood I have ever seen. You have residents who are Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, middle-aged, young, senior citizens. This community, I tip my hat. This community is a model for not only what your city should talk about, but what the county should talk about. And yet, you want to jam in 286 homes.
Mr. Chair, I would object. Point of order. Let's pause the clock, please, because we're speaking to zoning issues, not to the demographics of the community. If this is in fact a legislative, I would like to stick to the issues of rezoning and why you're putting on a presentation regarding why we should not change the zoning. I mean, I don't know if the demographics has anything to do with the zoning issue per se from a technical standpoint. And I would raise that point of order and objection to it.
Point point of order has been heard, and I would agree with Councilman that we need to focus on the zoning item and not speak on the actual plat, because the applicant came in and spoke exclusively on the zoning.
I don't intend to address plat, and to the extent that
The
you-
number of units and the process of what's going there, we're
Okay.
just talking about the zoning.
Then let's talk about the zoning. You're going to take a recreational area, and there are going to be multiple hundreds of homes, not only abutting, but within and throughout this existing community. That's going to result in, I don't know, 200 and some odd homes, 500 and some odd cars. And you can't get out of that property today going northbound during rush hour. And in order to go
Mr. Chair, I
south,
renew my objections. These are site plan related items regarding ingress and egress. We're talking about overall zoning changes.
with all due respect, Councilman, to change the zoning is the effect on the neighborhood. And the effect on the neighborhood is, as I'm trying to express, the neighborhood and the compatibility issue is raised by the applicant. And my point is the compatibility doesn't exist because you are creating a situation where the existing homeowners who've been there for decades, you'll exacerbate a problem that is already in existence because of the nature of where they are on Military Trail and everything around it. So it goes towards compatibility. That's why the issue of how many units, how many cars, where they're located is very much a zoning issue. So with all due respect, I think that's quite relevant in making your decision pro or con.
To follow up, and if you could pause the time, Madam Clerk, to follow up with that and the settlements where we want to try to keep this as a zoning concern. With this changing to a RPUD, the number of units would be a concern with the zoning, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. So just to simply look at the zoning, since this is the item we're discussing now. And that's why we continue to renew his objection, and I would be in agreement with it. So if you can continue the time, if we have continued comments for the zoning items.
How much time do I have, madam?
You have 4 minutes and
Thank you.
33 seconds.
So let's talk about the zoning discussion we had at the first meeting and back in November. As you may recall, the Planning Commission for the city voted on this project 0-7. It wasn't 3-4, which is a close vote, or even 2-5. It was 0-7 recommending that the application be denied. Even the staff, and we had quite a long discussion back in November, the staff didn't recommend approval. The staff recommended that you review. And I know the city manager was grilled at length about what that meant. Well, I'd like to propose to you what it meant is that the staff is not supportive of this project, but not in a position because of the technical compliance to recommend a denial either. This council voted 3-2. As we heard earlier, a vote of 4-1 is required. I will tell you that I think that in light of the compatibility issues raised by the applicant, plus the effect of on the community, I think you really need to consider this and not vote for it. I will leave you this, which I found very troublesome. We received an email from the applicant or the applicant's representative about an offer of $1 million to Lone Pine to change their mind and not object, which offer was rejected by the association.
I renew my objection.
Why is that an objectionable comment?
What does that have to do with zoning, sir?
Because the offer was then told that it was going to be made to the city.
That's not germane, Mr. Chair.
To that point, made to the city, the offer made to the city for what reference to the zoning?
I don't know, other than we have an email that they were going to offer it to the city, and I don't know if it was.
Will you rule on that, please?
Thank you, Councilman. Your point is properly received, and I would agree that we would want to stay germane to the zoning.
Okay, then thank you for your consideration, and I hope that you'll think about the people and the community on Military Trail and reject the application, but for reasons in addition to the inconsistency with the comp plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, if we can go into public comments, please.
So to help us out tonight, we're gonna call them three at a time. If you guys could line up over here, when your names are called, that'll kind of help us go a little bit quicker. So we have Mr. Anton D. Smith, Arnett Dragon, Al Williams.
Welcome to the podium, Ms. Smith.
So Ms. Annette Dragon and Mr. Al Williams, if you could make your way over.
Good evening. Anton Smith, resident of Lone Pond for 9 years. I'm coming here to strongly object to any rezoning and the development initiatives that have been spearheaded by the Wantman Group. My concerns really rest in 3 points. First, I perceive the rezoning as a potential manipulation of our democratic process. As we all recall, the most recent District 3 election was decided by a mere 100 votes. This rezoning into anything that's definitely going to get us into, whether it be 100 homes, but 260 homes, that's at least 260 homes. The message that the council will be sending is that instead of catering to the needs of their current constituents, they will just go get new ones. And then, because that goes into my second point, right? This rezoning is going to then go into development. This redevelopment is being spearheaded by Wantman Group, which is the driving force, and to my knowledge, is still facing litigation in the U.S. District Court in Colorado for alleged breach of a diversity contract. Second, the development places threatens the green space that we have. It's critical at this juncture. We have homeowners insurance that's going to be projected to spike by 40%, right? Green space does a great job with preventing floods. It allows place for that water to sit outside. If we just have that filled with homes, that is not going to assist us in what we're going to have to, what we have on the horizon. And with any long downturn, this company, they could stall out. They could do whatever they would want. They would postpone this project, and this would be ultimately a rezonement into black. From green, not to red, but to green and to gray. And lastly, the proposal that is in front of you, it is grossly out of date. The traffic assessment is from April of 2020. The 1 month that we all were inside during COVID. Everybody's been out here for 3 years. The landscape has changed. You know, when you are crossing into our community, it's like playing the old Nintendo game of Frogger. It is not something that anybody would want their kids to be in. We could have potentially another 260 homes. This would be a great misuse of the council's power to look at Lone Pine and have something that stretches 98% of our section of military and make us an afterthought.
Thank you.
Ms. Annette Dragon.
And
Mr.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And just as a reminder for all residents, we are in comments for the ordinance 4221, which is the zoning map amendment. As the last speaker stayed on topic with the zoning amendment, that's where we want to make sure all the speakers for this comment. We will have general public comments, which we can't speak. So just remember, this is in reference to the zoning. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ms. Annette Dragon, Mr. Al Williams, and then Mr. David Lovelace.
Welcome, Ms. Annette. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Councilman.
Thank
Hello, everyone. Rezoning the Lone Pine Golf Course property would be a crime and a crying shame. This green space is the only green space on the Military Trail corridor in Riviera Beach. As our elected officials, it's your responsibility to preserve our very few remaining green spaces in the city, rather than create a myriad of logistical problems for the Lone Pine and surrounding communities of this green space. If you vote to rezone from recreational to residential, you will be creating a huge traffic problem along Military Trail, which is already an extremely hazardous road to get onto from Lone Pine and the surrounding communities, but also adding strain to the already overstressed police department, fire department, hospitals, and schools. It will create huge issues for all the surrounding residents in terms of drainage, air quality, lack of natural habitats for flora and fauna that currently live in this green space. Please do not rezone.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Annette.
Next, we have Mr. Al Williams, Mr. David Lovelace, and Mr. Eric Ward.
Welcome, Mr. Williams.
How you doing? I think I know you. But anyway, just kind of piggybacking on what's already been said.
If you could just state your name for the record as well.
For
sir.
the record, it's Alvin Williams, Al Williams, whatever. But I am totally in objection to the application. And then the comment about this would be compatible, absolutely improper, because they don't have to live there. We live there. And I dare anybody to sit there and say that let's stick to the zoning issues. We have to sleep there every night. We got shootings on the back road of Haverhill, constantly, loud banging. And then you're going to just stick this down our throats to say, oh, well, the zoning. Okay, well, the zoning is a problem. It's a problem in two facets, because it's going to be a problem for people who don't want it. Why is this being stuck down our throats when we don't want it? It's pretty clear and obvious we don't want it. You heard Mrs. Godot say that it's going to require a 4 out of 5 vote. Why? Because we protested it. It shouldn't have never even gotten this far. Why? Why did it get this far? It's really, it's very concerning that it's gotten this far. People don't want it in our communities. Look at Briny Breezes. They were offered $1 million for their property and they still said no. Why is it that we can't have a voice in our community? We don't want it. We don't want it. It shouldn't even be an issue. And I'm very appalled at the people that are still pushing it, because they don't have to live there. We have to live there. We got to deal with the consequences of all of this extra parking nightmare and all of the drainage and the flooding that's currently there now. What we need to do is try to figure out how to get our flooding situation under control. The city has not even done that. They have not even come up with a plan to curb the flooding in our community, yet alone they want to stick 300 and something homes in our backyard, which is going to create a nightmare. So yes, we're going to stick to the zoning issue, but at the same time, we don't want it in our community. We have a right to determine what goes in our community, and we don't want it. It's pretty clear and concise on that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Williams.
Mr. David Lovelace, Mr. Eric Ward, and Mr. Jeff Haverson, Halverson.
Welcome, Mr. Lovelace.
Hi, Dave Lovelace, Lone Pine resident for 30 years, Riviera Beach resident for 30 plus years. And, talking about the zoning, how it's going to affect us as a community is the fact that it'll change our lifestyle dramatically. Everything you've already heard about the additional traffic we'll have to deal with, as it was already stated, it's already impossible from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock to get out on the military trail or to get off of military trail into our community. There are no lights there. There's no way for us to make entrance or exit without it being taking your life in your own hands, or like the other gentleman said, playing Frogger. It's just as ridiculous as it is. And then to add all the homes that you want to add, which will obviously add, that many more cars, probably at least 2, maybe even more cars to each home. And it's just going to make it that much worse for us as a community and as Riviera Beach residents and the voting public. Now, One of the gentlemen said, the gentleman on the end there had mentioned earlier about the city of Riviera Beach is a great place to live, work, and play. Well, they get rid of this green space, and that's just taking out the whole play option for the city of Riviera Beach. There is no other golf course in Riviera Beach for people to play golf at. And right now, there's not even that one because the owner of the golf course, I think, decided to shut down only to try to put pressure on us as the grass grows. So I've been out there cutting the grass behind my house, which is a golf course grass, to make sure that it looks better than it would by letting him continue to let it grow. And I haven't seen the city do anything about making him get out there and maintain the property behind the property that he owns behind my house. So I guess it's just going to get worse as time goes on unless code enforcement gets out there and tells the owner of the golf course to do something about it. Now, the question was raised about the golf course being a closed golf course, and that the only option that we have is this residential neighborhood going inside our neighborhood. Well, what about, has the owner of the golf course tried to sell the golf course as a golf course? I haven't heard anything about that. Now, they purchased the golf course, I don't know, 20-something years ago, 30-something years ago when they bought this golf course. They bought it as a golf course from the person before them who was running it as a golf course that ran the golf course from the time the golf course started, when the neighborhood started. That's why both have the same name, Lone Pine Golf Course and Lone Pine Neighborhood Association. That's why the names are the same, because it all began together. And when I purchased my home on the golf course, I paid a premium for that lot because it is on the golf course.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you. Vote against it. Do the right thing.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Eric Ward, Mr. Jeff Halverson, and Mr. James Elder.
Hi, my name is Eric Ward. I've been a resident of Lone Pine since 1985. Linda wanted to be here tonight also, but she had to work tonight. This change of zoning would obviously be bad for all the many reasons. It would really be detrimental to the people of Riviera Beach, indisputably. But there was another issue that just came up like at the last meeting that really should have been discussed at the beginning, and it was presented the wrong way around. We, the citizens of Lone Pine, are being depicted as the villains who are trying to deprive the owner of the golf course of his right to use it, to the land as he pleases, and our actions are threatening to cost him millions of dollars. But that's the wrong way around. Actually, the land is worth what it is with the zoning, because that's what it's been for decades and decades. And the zoning should be seen as a city-owned asset worth millions of dollars. The owner of the golf course is asking you to give him that asset for free at our detriment. As a longtime resident, I resent that our asset may be given away for free to somebody to use it against our best interests. We need an in-depth discussion of how this land should best be used and what's practical and realistic for the community. That discussion should have occurred 4 years ago, but it didn't, but it's not too late. That needs to be done first before this zoning could be changed. So I ask you to vote against the zoning and go back to the beginning and discuss what we can really do with this land that'll benefit the city rather than a few wealthy landowners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Next, we will have Mr. Jeff Halverson, Mr. James Elder, and Mr. Bill Willage.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, distinguished council members. Jeff Halverson at 2536 Doral Way in Lone Pine since 1985. That's 38 years. I'm a trained civil engineer, 30 years with the City of West Palm Beach in engineering and public works, 3 years in general contracting, and currently with Palm Beach County CID. I'm speaking against the rezoning. When I purchased my property in 1985, the golf course lot was $10,000 more. I do not own a golf course lot. With the proposed zoning, that $10,000 investment and its current value is washed away. In the proposed zoning or any rezoning of a density higher than Lone Pine, it downgrades and devalues the Lone Pine community. In replatting, as a past member of the West Palm Beach Plats and Review Committee for 11 years, I have seen a lot of site plans. If the right-of-way or paved street width or sidewalk width or house setback lies less than that in the current Lone Pine estates, then the proposed rezoning is not even compatible to the Lone Pine community and should be rejected. A rhetorical question. Was a study done regarding the impact of the rezoning that the rezoning will have on the home values in Lone Pine? I don't think so. The proposed rezoning allows a tight, compact community, I'm sure you know that, which is substandard adjacent to Lone Pine. It does maximize a high return on investment to the developers of the Lone Pine, of anybody other than Lone Pine homeowners. Let's not build a great city by building substandard homes among an established, thriving community. Thank you.
Mr. James Elder, Mr. Bill Walatich, Ms. Joyce Murphy.
Welcome, Mr. Elder.
Good evening, council members, mayor. Yes, I'm a resident of Lone Pine for 39 years. I bought the house in '84. I am on the golf course. It was sold to me as a golf course view, golf course community, which it has been for these 39 years. What the developer and their attorneys are saying is not exactly true. Mr. Sermon said they had 11 meetings with us. The 11 meetings with us was only to set up some easels and show us these models. They did never want to negotiate. You used the word earlier, negotiate with an employee or something. In any one of those meetings, they have not met with us to negotiate setback of these homes, of these properties, some sort of compensation, consideration for what we paid earlier to be on the golf course. It's all take, take, take. And there is no consideration to the homeowners. We come here and we plead our heart out to what this is going to do to us. And it's true. It's going to turn our world upside down. The traffic is horrendous, as most of you know. Probably two of you that were late here today was hung up in traffic. You get on Military Trail during rush hour, and if there's an accident, it's not safe. Emergency people can't get to you. They say they had a report from the traffic and they had a report from the police. Well, they haven't looked at it lately, and that's only going to get worse. So I'm here to say vote no on this project. I actually tried to negotiate with their attorneys after planning and zoning voted it down a year ago, over a year ago, out here in this parking lot. They didn't want to talk. I said, why don't you come and meet the homeowners and negotiate, talk to us. Just don't show us your models of what you're going to do. Let's talk setbacks. Let's get some sort of forward negotiation, consideration for what we're giving up. So vote no, and good evening.
Mr. Bill Walatich, Ms. Joyce Murphy, Ms. Rochelle Baker Hughes.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Bill.
Happy to be here to explain what I want everybody to know. And here we go. The big thing is this. You guys are the ones that are going to vote on this. Here's the deal. The council, being elected by the people, for the people, must vote according to the people. The vote must not be determined by big business. It's now time for the council to stand up and be counted and show you are with the residents. The land in question was never meant to be zoned residential. If it was, the land would have not been zoned recreational to begin with. Think about that. You have heard all the negative issues rezoning will ultimately produce. Who will be responsible for the problems these negative issues will eventually produce? Will it be the city or the long-gone developer, or are the residents being left responsible for the expense of the cleanup? I can probably guess who it would be. Probably the residents. You, as the voting body, could put an end to this debacle once and for all by voting no. Voting no are the wishes of the vast majority of the people and communities affected by rezoning. Do not vote according to big corporations whose only interest is to make money and skip town. You were not elected by big business. Big business is not Riviera Beach residents. The people are. Don't destroy communities like Lone Pine by rezoning. Development is supposed to help communities, not destroy them. Help communities that really would benefit from development. The city officials need to look around the city and try to improve impoverished areas. I am sure, as in any city, there are areas that can use developmental improvement. The city needs to use some common sense here and look into those areas. Improve what needs to be improved, not the other way around. Do what you should, not what you can. One other thing, and I didn't even have this in my speech until I heard it this evening. I think this board or this committee or this council should ask the developers what the $1 million was for if it wasn't for rezoning. I think that's the question you should ask them. Why would they do that? It only leads to one conclusion. They wanted support to get the rezoning done. Don't rezone Lone Pine. It is a great neighborhood. We love it, and we don't want it upset. Thank you.
Ms. Joyce Murphy, Ms. Rochelle Baker Hughes, Ms. Lisa Wilcox.
Hi, I'm Joyce Murphy, resident of Lone Pine Estates in Riviera Beach. I'm here once again to remind you that I'm absolutely against the rezoning of the Lone Pine Golf Course. And I expect that you have listened to me and other Riviera Beach residents. And as our representatives, you will agree to our request to not allow a zoning change. Please leave it zoned as residential green space. To reiterate, these are some items of concern. First and foremost, your zoning board unanimously voted this rezoning down. Loss of green space, the home to nature and endangered wildlife. Traffic will be a nightmare. You've heard that several times. Crime will increase. Lone Pine homes were and still are being sold as golf course community. Residents have paid extra to live on a golf course, as I had, and green space. It's my understanding that the golf course owner himself recently sold his Lone Pine Estates home as a home with a golf course view. Imagine that. Knowing he was selling the golf course to a developer. Please vote no to rezoning. And I too would like to know the explanation of the $1 million bribe, because that's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Ms. Rochelle Baker Hughes, Ms. Lisa Wilcox, and Mr. Fane Lozman.
Oopsie. Trying to take the microphone in my own hand. Good evening, board. My name is Rochelle Baker Hughes, also city manager and all the city staff. I am up here to say I am against rezoning the golf course. When you looked at the map, you can see that the golf course is intertwined with our development. I'm on the 17th fairway. It's my backyard. It's not like your other golf courses in the area that maybe have been turned into developments and the houses sat way back from the golf course. Our homes are right on the golf course. Like from here to your table is the golf course. So it's not like there's a lot of space for anything to be developed. So to rezone, to take what the original development was for, which was for a golf course community, if you go back and you look in all the documents from 1975, 76, whatever, they made it to be a golf course. That's why it's so intertwined within our development. So to rezone and try to change that, yes, there'd be a lot of stress on us homeowners. I live on the golf course. I paid an extreme amount, an extra amount to have that greenery behind me. Let's just say greenery behind me. So, house 2 doors down from me just sold for $500,000. Guess what? You rezone it and you change it, I'm going to lose out on that because my house value will go down because there's something, it's not green space behind me anymore. It could be 3, 4 homes behind me, depending on what's it would be rezoned to. So I plead, I beg the board, please vote no to rezone for your citizens, your residents, your voters. Please vote against the rezoning. Thank you.
Miss Lisa Wilcox, Mr. Fane Lozman, Mr. Sammy Brown.
Good evening. Boy, it's been a long time, hasn't it? We've been doing this a long time now. You know, I'm sure Mr. Sermon's made a little mistakey poo on the slide there because the first meeting that we had was at Palm Beach Lakes High School, where almost all of Lone Pine was in attendance. And I didn't see that on the slide. I may have been mistaken, but I didn't see that one on there. The other meetings that they offered to us, many of us didn't get letters to. It was just kind of, I call it the shenanigans of D.R. Horton. I have been a teacher my entire life, and I work with specific learning disabilities. We get the kids no one wants. We get the kids that have failed everywhere. And you know, when they come to our little tiny school, they have a whole bag of tricks. And so it's my job, I'm in the decontamination chamber room, to de-trick them. And I have seen all of those little tricks done with D.R. Horton and us. Just a little thought out there. But you know, I told my students, because they know what's been going on, I've been talking to them about it. They're probably watching right now live on YouTube. And I told them we're still in school. Our principal said we're going forward while the rest of the world goes backwards. So we're nailing it. We start early, we end late. But I told them, I said, do you all know the difference between good and evil, between right and wrong? And we discussed it for a little while. And I believe I know exactly where each of you stands because we have been talking with you. We have been communing with you. We know where you are on this issue. So we know how the vote should go tonight. And if it doesn't, there will be some suspicion because we know. According to my records, it's going to be a 3-2. We've already talked to everybody. Everybody's talked to us. They've assured us the way it's going to go. So we should be confident tonight. We should know who's in our corner. But if for some reason it doesn't go that way, we will be suspect. We will be suspicious. And my future voters will know that they can't trust because I've already told them. I said, this is the way it's going to go. Watch for it. We already know who's going to vote which way. We've already talked to them. So we just know. We know where it's going. We've already talked about all the issues. We know it. You guys know it forwards and backwards. The Lone Pine Golf Course was closed for 2 years, and it was purchased by this present family that owns it now, whose nephew and son was actually one of my students. So know the family very well.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Fane Lozman, Mr. Sammy Brown, and Francis Scott.
Fane
Welcome,
Lozman,
Ms. Lozman.
Singer Island.
you know, there's another way to do this. I haven't seen one person come in here and say they want new homes being built on the golf course. I suggest we table this item, put it on the ballot in November, and let the voters decide, do you want to get rid of the last golf course in Riviera Beach or not? Because at the end of the day, the 5 of you, we're your bosses. Some of you think that you control us. It doesn't work that way. We voted you into office, okay? And the people, you go by majority rule. And the point of this is such a big decision to get rid of the last golf course in Riviera Beach. The voters should decide that. You need that input because you're not going to get a majority of voters in this city that's going to come in and say, hey, let's go get rid of the last golf course. That's not going to happen. So why don't you table this item, put it on the ballot in November, and see how the voters decide it.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Logan.
Mr. Sammy Brown,
All righty.
Francisca Scott, and Cindy March.
All righty. Good evening, Honorable Chair, Mayor, council members, and residents of Riviera Beach. Tonight, we face a crucial decision regarding the potential rezoning of the golf course at Lone
If you
Pine
could state
Estates.
your name for the record, please, sir.
Sammy Brown, Riviera
Thanks,
Beach.
sir.
Thank you. This decision holds significant implications for the character and well-being of our community. I strongly urge you to vote against the rezoning proposal tonight, while I understand the need for affordable and workforce housing in our city, it is essential to consider the long-term consequences of this rezoning. This proposed development, consisting of market rate housing, does not address the present issue of affordable housing that many of our residents are facing. We must prioritize the needs of our community and ensure that development plans align with our value and goals as a city and organization. This golf course represents one of the last remaining pieces of open land within our city limits. It is a precious green space that offers recreational opportunities and a sense of serenity for those who visit and reside there, in particular, those that live in Lone Pine Estates. Rezoning this land for housing development would irreversibly alter the fabric of our community and deprive future generations of the benefits that open spaces provide, in particular, residents, again, who live in Lone Pine Estates. Instead of rushing into rezoning and allowing houses to be replaced to replace the golf course, we should encourage the current owner to seek a buyer or developer who would maintain the area as recreational space or that alike. By doing so, we preserve the unique character of our city and ensure that the city of Riviera Beach residents understand that we prioritize the well-being and quality of life of our residents over special interest. We should continue to explore alternative solutions to address the needs of affordable and workforce housing within our community, but not at the expense of the quality of life of residents and homeowners who already live here. It is our responsibility as a city to seek creative and sustainable approaches that strike a balance between economic growth and preservation of our environmental and community values. Council members, I urge you to carefully consider the ramifications of the rezoning proposal. Let us prioritize the preservation of our last remaining open green space on the west side of Riviera Beach. And with that, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Franca Scott, Miss Cindy March, and Miss Anna Bergny.
My name is Francis Scott, Lone Pine Estates, probably the oldest one there. We moved there in 1980. A lot of words have been said here tonight. A lot of words have been said through the entire process. I had something that I wanted to say tonight, and then someone said something about compatibility with the rezoning and Lone Pine Estates. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good because there is a lot of inconsistencies with this rezoning. And one of them were brought to my attention very early prior to the first meeting or the first vote. And that's with Mr. Larson was in my home, sitting in the living room with my wife and I. and he spoke of all the inconsistencies: traffic, drainage, water, everything that's going to affect every member of Lone Pine Estates. 99% of them will be detrimental to our lifestyle, our homes, our flooding, our water pressure, simple things that we take into consideration. But in Mr. Lawson's comment, sir, I agree with you. Accepting this zoning or the building of these homes should never occur. Y'all have a great evening. I vote no, please. Thank you.
Miss Cindy March, Miss Anna Verdney, Miss J.B. Dixon.
Good evening, Cindy March. I know you all say stick with the zoning. I'm gonna stick with it, but I'm gonna call a spade as I'm sticking with the zoning, okay? You all need to ask yourself, what if it was my resident? That's the first thing you need to ask yourself. And that zoning area, you already have traffic on Military Trail. I don't know if you all picked up, and maybe I'm wrong for saying this, and correct me if I am, Trojan, you can rebuttal, interrupt, or whatever. We already know how you're gonna vote. You're gonna vote 3-2 because you already told us. Well, whoever told whoever what, that's breaking the sunshine law. Period, point, simple as that. So if the council's up there that say they're gonna go along with them, and they already don't discuss it with them, that needs to be investigated. I'm with Lone Pine because I remember eminent domain. People had been in their homes for 40 and 50 years and got uprooted from out their homes to build a school. And this particular school still haven't been built. And we talking about elderly people. You know, people work hard and they do whatever they can to be a homeowner because the city of Revere Beach is the place to live, work, and play. People don't want to be uprooted. At these people age and the way the housing market is now, where are these people gonna go? I'm fighting right now to try to buy a house. Rent is $1,800 for a 2-bedroom. You understand me? So you all need to consider all of this and put yourself in their predicament. That is the green area. We don't have recreation for as a movie theater. Go to some of these dilapidated neighborhoods with these slumlords and fix up that area, then go in and interrupt another area that's already in livable condition. If we're gonna go and get the big developers, get somebody to give us some clean water. Get somebody to give us some adequate street lighting. You see what happened on Australian? I've been up here fighting for the people for years now. I knock on these same people's doors and ask for you all votes. They don't even know who you all are. And I sit down and I explain to them, this is what this person is about. And I'm going to be an advocate for the city of Revere Beach, whether I stay on the rooftop of this building or where I stay in Wellington, because I love the city of Revere Beach. My heart is in it. But when we know better, we do better. And you got to do better for the residents. Because like Thane Losman said, we put you all in office. And just like we put you all in office, you all can get put out of office. You understand me? And I don't have no person for dealing with nobody. I have to humble myself. I have came to this podium and been apologetic because when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But when I'm right, I'm right. I don't care if you're black or white. You got to do right by the voters.
Next, we will have Miss Anna Verdney, followed by Miss J.B. Dixon. Mr. Chair, I have another card for Miss Joyce Murphy, who recently just spoke, so I'm going to move this card to 8C.
Thank you.
8C.
Welcome, Ms. Verdner.
Hi, my name is Anna Verdney. I am not a resident of Lone Pine Estates. I live in Lakeview Park, and I'm against the rezoning at Lone Pine Estates. I was looking at the screening tool from the Department of Environmental Justice. Lone Pine Estates sits at 88% airborne particle pollution. 88%, that's average. You take away their trees, you're going to put them at where you're putting Lakeview Park at 96%. We're inhaling toxins. You're going to do the same thing to Lone Pine Estates. Why would you do that? Why would you take away the only green space that you have to purify the air that we're breathing? You're destroying our communities when you do that. I bet, and I want this on record, that Mr. Sermons has never seen that tool and never used that tool, and he should be using that tool before he even comes in front of this council. Why? Because if he doesn't use the tool, you guys are not going to have the tools to make the decisions that you need to make for us. So I say table this until you have the appropriate information to be able to save these communities. You're overdeveloping and you're destroying our earth. You're destroying our lungs. That's what you're doing to Lone Pine Estates. I looked them up this morning. They are 88%. That's a problem. You're taking an average community and you're going to destroy it. That is not fair to these people. Nor is it fair to the air that I'm breathing at Lakeview Park. But hey, you're doing it. Table it. Let them decide what they want to do with their golf course. Let us decide. It's our decision to make. Thank you.
Good comments, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we will have Ms. J.B. Dixon, and lastly, Mr. Julian Jackson. Ms. J.B. Dixon.
Welcome, Ms. Dixon.
J.B. Dixon from Riviera Beach on Singer Island. I would also urge you to vote no to this, but not for some of the other reasons that have been given. I don't think that we need to put this on the ballot. That is why people have elected you. You are supposed to vote for them, and they have placed their trust in you to do that. So let's not go down that slippery slide of everything that is controversial should be put on the ballot. First of all, as you know, it's not that easy to do so. We also don't need to put this off any longer by tabling it. I think what you need to do is look at, which I know you have, the pros and the cons of this. But the point is that a huge number of people, although unfortunately they've never shown much of an interest in Riviera Beach before in that community, which I somewhat resent, but hopefully now they will see that perhaps they should become more involved. They have mounted a terrific community response to this, and I think you have a responsibility to ignore the $1 million that some of you may be considering and truly represent the people who, although they have a very poor voting record and they really didn't elect any of you, I think that they are your constituents, they have spoken, and I think you need to listen to them, vote no on rezoning.
The last card I have, Mr. Chair, is Mr. Julian Jackson. You have checked off public comments, but you've written Lone Pine, so I'm calling it now.
Say that again?
You have checked off for public comments, but you've written Lone Pine Golf Course next to it.
Of
So
course.
yes.
Mr. Julian, and to that point, this is the rezoning of the space.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
My name is Julian Jackson, resident of Lone Pine Estates. As it relates to the project under consideration for the city, conventional thinking suggests more revenue, more projects the city can fund. As we all saw from the presentation from the auditors, revenues are up. Revenues last year, 149 million, I'm rounding. Revenues the current year, 153 million. Revenues are growing. My position on this issue is to vote no for this rezoning. Basically, the general welfare of the city will be greatly diminished with the approval of this rezoning. I urge you to consider the will of the people.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, questions for our staff or for the presenters?
Mr. Chair,
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
I think we moved very quickly, and I didn't get an opportunity to ask some questions for Mr. Steve Daniels. Can I be allowed to do that, please?
Please, Councilman, now's the time for us colleagues to ask all the questions. Ms. Daniels, if you can approach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Daniels, you mentioned that it was your position that this was incompatible, and then you also mentioned, sorry, I gotta see my own writing. Technically inconsistent with the land use. And obviously, we just resolved at the start of the meeting that there is a natural inconsistency that you're gonna have to take one before the other, but explain what you mean by incompatible, because obviously I've seen what was presented by the applicant. Can you elaborate on your definition of what you were describing?
Sure. The applicant stated in their presentation that their application was compatible because up and down Military Trail or other multifamily medium to high density zonings. My comment about it not being compatible was because it's not compatible with this specific piece of property. You can take compatibility and compare it to what's next door, or you can take compatibility and compare it what's up and down the street, or throughout the town, or throughout Palm Beach County. You can go as long as you want. But if you have single-family homes surrounded by a lot and they want to put a 12-story building because 20, 50, 100 yards down the street there's a 20-story building, well, they'll say it's compatible. I would submit that it's not. And what you've heard this afternoon or this evening from the residents, it's not compatible in their minds with what they bought, what they have, where they've been living for 25, 30 years.
Oh, so your definition of compatibility wasn't referring to compatible with the zoning that's adjacent. You had a different definition of incompatibility.
Well, no, I have the same definition. The applicant's definition of compatibility is to go up and down Military Trail. My definition of compatibility is to the immediate neighborhood for which not only the project abuts, but as one of the unit owners mentioned, intertwines throughout the community. I think that's your first standard, and I think that's the first place you ought to look. Is it compatible or not with what's right, not only next door, but throughout the property? Not to go up the street 400 yards or down the street half a mile.
So, Mr. Daniels, did you read staff's Development Services staff report regarding this compatibility issue?
I read it back in November. I have not read it in the last several months.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman.
I wanted to ask a couple questions for Whitman Group.
Any other questions?
That's
Before you go, Councilman, if we had any other questions for the gentleman here, colleagues? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. For the Watman Group, we had a few questions.
Good evening.
Thank you. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm just trying not to address the traffic issue since that wouldn't precisely deal with zoning per se, but the compatibility portion, what was the proposed use is RPUD, Residential Plan Unit Development? Is that
Correct.
All right, and was it you that explained the consistent with what's around us, or was that Ms. Calhoun that spoke on the, I think she said it was her. So I would like to, clarify your explanation of compatible and consistent with what's around us.
Thank you. I don't know if we have a chance to put the map up so you can see it demonstrated, but the argument just made by council was exactly what we stated was compatible. Lone Pine consists of single-family homes, What we are proposing adjacent to Lone Pine, the existing single-family homes, are single-family homes. So the rezoning designation that we are requesting is exactly the definition of compatible, residential to residential. The comparison I made was related directly to the adjacent homes that we are proposing to go next to. What I further said was the existing zoning could be construed as incompatible because of the various uses that are more highly intense than what is permitted, than what was there, which was the golf course.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead,
remind me of those uses, please. Because I guess what you're saying is not deemed compatible now compared to what's adjacent to it.
Councilmember McCoy, I think the assumption is that the use that was there, the golf course, was compatible because people who lived there argued or lived adjacent to a golf course, so they were a golf course community. The thing to remember is that we're considering the zoning of the property, not the use. So the current zoning of the property is
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, clarify what you mean RO.
Recreational open space. The current zoning designation of the property that used to operate as a golf course that is now closed is recreational open space, RO. The uses permitted under the RO designation, which is the property's current zoning designation, are as follows: archery range, baseball driving range, golf course, golf driving range, miniature golf course, shuffleboard court, swimming pool, tennis court, and the last is any use of the outdoor recreational type which is found by the city council to be similar in character to the surrounding property and is compatible to the surrounding property.
So that seems like that's pretty discretionary. Any use compatible, because I guess we can argue that you could expand Rapids Water Park across the street and say that that's compatible. So it seems pretty discretionary or open-ended, I should say.
So, thank you. So in response,
Excuse me, before we do go on, everyone, we are going to try to get through this, but we cannot have outbursts, please. Go ahead, Ms. Calhoun.
So in response to that question, Councilmember McCoy, you're correct. Number 9 specifically is very discretionary. And the Rapids Water Park is an example of something that could go on the property because it's currently permitted. A Top Golf, it is miniature golf. Could be considered a permitted use. Miniature golf is specifically listed as a permitted use. I would imagine that go-kart racing, because it could be considered compatible, could be a use that could go on the property. So the point we're making with regard to the rezoning and the compatibility is that the current zoning allows uses that are not compatible with single-family homes. Contrary to what we're requesting to zone to residential uses, specifically single-family homes, which we discussed if we get to the site plan, are specifically consistent with the existing uses on this property that is privately owned by residents, by a member of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions from Ms. Calhoun or the Wattman Group? Colleagues? Councilman? Thank you, Ms. Calhoun.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions for staff or any other speakers? Okay, Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel?
No.
Councilperson Miller Anderson?
No.
Councilperson McCoy?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
No.
Chairperson Lawson?
No.
That vote
Madam Clerk.
failed.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
That vote failed, Mr. Chair, with only Councilperson McCoy Voting in favor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This question was actually posed during the agenda review. The next item that we have is 8C, the future land use. Attorney Nguyen or Ms. Godot?
Mr. Chair,
Correct, we will go into we have 5 public comment cards. We were going to go into public comment first. While we're go ahead and organizing public comment, if you could give us feedback on the remaining items, Ms. Godot?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do need to bring up one issue. Since the motion to approve failed due to the vote, that means that there's been no action taken. So technically, a motion to deny the application needs to follow to actually close out the application. And that's pursuant to Florida statute. You have to take action on it. Otherwise, if just the motion to approve fails, then there's no action. So technically, the application is still pending. So what we would need is a motion to deny the zoning change request. And that's just a legal technicality, and I'm sorry, but because the motion didn't get approved, we have to have a motion that does get approved.
Motion to deny the zoning request.
Thank you.
second.
Discussion? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
No.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes with Councilperson McCoy voting in favor of.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If we can't go into public comments,
I dissent.
I'm sorry, dissenting.
Thank you.
I'm looking
Mr. Chair,
for,
we do have 10 public comment cards, and the acceptance of public comment cards for general public comment is now closed.
public comment cards shall begin at 7:30 unless there's no further business. And if the items to be considered at 7:30, then comments from the public shall begin immediately after the item has concluded. Please be reminded that the City Council Board has adopted rules of decorum governing the public comment during official meetings, which has been posted at the front desk. In an effort to preserve order, if any of the rules are not adhered to, the City Council's chairperson may have any disruptive speaker or attendee removed from the podium, from the meeting, or from the building. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Go ahead, Madam Clerk. If we could keep the talking down, we're still continuing with the meeting, please.
Miss Joyce Murphy, are you still here? Joyce Murphy?
Welcome, Ms. Joyce.
I just want to thank everybody who voted for us and really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Joyce.
Mr. Lloyd Brown, Mr. Sammy Brown.
Mr. Lloyd Brown? Yes, sir. Welcome to the podium, Mr. Brown.
How y'all doing? My name Lloyd Brown. You already know that. But you know what? I watched a lot of war things, you know, and Hitler was similar to y'all. All his generals were telling Hitler, say, you shouldn't do this. But no, he was in control. That's why Germany lost. Y'all in control, you think. But just like those people in Long Pine, it's a lot of voters out there, and you ain't gonna be there next year. Honestly, it's a shame. It really is a shame that, I mean, I thought maybe back in Nazi Germany where you couldn't make up your mind and say what you wanted to say, you know, without somebody coming back, you know, maybe I don't explain what I'm saying too much, but all I say is this a bad word? Y'all really suck. Honestly, you do. Because these people don't want that, and you steady trying to push it. I'm glad you voted it down. And you could see the people who want it. I mean, I don't know if you're getting paid to get up here, and I don't know nothing about the $1 million, and I haven't been over here in a while, but I'm back. I'm back, and I will be back. Only reason I'm leaving out, my dogs need to be fed, and I'm not concerned about y'all. So it's like, as long as those people got what they wanted, I really don't have to say nothing. Bye.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Mr. Sammy Brown, Miss Cindy March, Miss Doretta Polk.
Welcome,
or
Sammy
Polk
Brown.
Doretta.
Hello again. My name is Sammy Brown, Riviera Beach. Good evening, Honorable Chair and Mayor, City Council members, and fellow residents. Today, I am proud and grateful to express my heartfelt appreciation for the efforts of Councilperson Dr. Julia Botel and Palm Beach State College for reestablishing the invaluable educational courses that were once offered and available in our community. Having served as a former legislative aide and the person who instituted and managed these programs for our city, I had the privilege of witnessing the positive impact of these programs on the lives of our residents and city employees. These opportunities have transformative and empowering educational employment enhancement opportunities. This program has opened doors to new career paths and ultimately contributing to the overall workforce and economic development of Riviera Beach. Councilwoman Botel's collaboration with Palm Beach State College to reinstitute these courses demonstrate her understanding of the benefits of that of education and what it can bring to individuals and in our city as a whole. One of the best aspects of this initiative is the accessibility. We eliminated the financial barrier with people being able to qualify for financial aid and other programs such as, not to mention that this program was started right here in the city of Riviera Beach at our in our public works training room, where it eliminated the barrier for transportation. Instead of having to drive way over to Palm Beach Gardens, they were able to attend school and do their college classes right here in the city of Riviera Beach. The impact of these courses reach far beyond the individual participants, shaping the very foundation of our community and paving the way for a brighter and more prosperous future. Let us continue to support and celebrate these initiatives and prioritize educational enhancement opportunities and foster lifelong learning. Together, we can build a stronger and more vibrant Riviera Beach. Also, I just wanted to mention a shout out to Councilwoman Lanier for her wonderful 1619 project that she held, I think it was last week, a wonderful conversation and dialogue with Brian Knowles, who works for Palm Beach County. I think he's the director of the African American Studies Department, as well as Miss Leah Gaines, who gave an incredible presentation. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Thank you for your comments.
Miss Cindy March, Miss Doretta Polk, Mr. Thane Lozman.
Ms. Cindy March. I believe Ms. March stepped out. Ms. Doretta Polk.
And then Mr. Thane Lozman will follow Ms. Polk.
Good evening. My name is Doretta Polk, and I'm a resident of Riviera Beach. I just want to continue our prayers along with Mrs. Gwen Oates, along with the two people who lost their lives and our also police officer. I just want to, I attended Juneteenth family night at the Riviera Beach Library on June 14th. It was absolutely phenomenal. There, Mrs. April, who works there, Mrs. Arnold, and the director is Mr. Brody. Mrs. April had all the children of different ages. They were so engaged. They were so attentive and learning about how the slaves come to freedom. And they were able to go recite what the teachings that she had, Mrs. April, informed them of, and it was so enlightening. This is what we have to do. We have to get the little youth, little ones, as they grow. This was a very, very, very promising, and I hope this next year they do the same thing because it was very much worthwhile. I also attended the 1619 project on June 15th. by our councilwoman Shirley Lanier. It was also a great event on June 15th here at the marina. We at that setting, I really didn't know, and it was learning for several other people that was in there. We were emancipated in May, not June. So all of this was education factors for me. We also did different skits concerning different articles concerning slavery, and that was very educational. She had a raffle, 1619 books that we was raffled off, and I was able to win one of them. I'm reading them halfway through it. Very, 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 very educational, very informative. As soon as I finish, I'm going to send that off to my child, who will be reading it, and then he'll give it to his children, because it's very, very important. Because even when talking to my grands, they don't know some of these things that had happened, especially in May when we were emancipated. And I will thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pope.
And congratulations to the longtime residents. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Fane Lozman, Ms. Mary Bram, and Ms. J.B. Dixon.
Fane Lozman, contrary to the representation made at the last meeting, the 5 of you did vote for comp plan amendment after Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 59 that required you to have the private property Bill of Rights done first. Why did it take a year and a half to get the first reading of the private property Bill of Rights? I don't know. But one of the important things I don't think you guys appreciated, Sermons had stood up for years and Bauman has stood up for years and said, hey, we have a savings clause on the submerged lands on Singer Island. You snuck through, or Botel, who's obsessed with me, and Sermons and Bauman snuck through changing the minimum lot size from 1 house per 1 acre to 1 house per 20 acres. No one has a 20-acre parcel. You have 6, 8, 12, 5. So in essence, what you've done is, because there's no savings clause anymore, no one, even if you get judicially determined vested rights, no one can build a house. They can fill in the property, but they can't build a house. So yes, Mr. Lanier, you voted to get rid of the savings clause that was put in effect to preclude a taking. I've talked to my neighbor. There's going to be a rash of litigation over why did you get rid of the savings clause? Why did you push through this change after Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 59? I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why the property owners had to find out after the fact. Why weren't they put on notice? Why? Because of Botel. Let's talk about what Bauman did, and Mr. McCoy brought it up. They want to change a section corner that the state of Florida and the county and everybody's been using since 1915. They gave Bauman over $100,000 to get the surveyor guy, George Chappa Young, and he said, well, this 1915 corner, so in the year 1915, is off by 65 feet, and therefore it's going to shift everybody's boundary. 3 governors have said the 1915 corner is what everybody's been using for 108 years. This city's municipal boundaries is based on the 1915 corner, yet you guys approved over $100,000 to get one surveyor in the last 108 years, say it's in the wrong place. That's malfeasance. You can't do that. You ought to go back to Bauman and you say, Bauman, we want our $100,000+ back. You didn't tell us that 3 governors and the state of Florida uses the 1915 corner. I don't think any judge is ever going to say, we're going to move it to what this new survey guy said. And you know why? Because if you've paid taxes for 7 years on your property, like we have for 4601, adverse possession means you can keep it. So you're not going to ever get us to move, because everybody's going to say, we've been paying taxes on the 1915 corner, and adverse possession means we don't have to move. Bauman scammed you guys, and Botel pushed for that. Get back your $100,000.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Ms. Mary Brown and Ms. J.B. Dixon. And then Mr. Julian Jackson, if he's still here.
Good evening, Miss Mary Brown. See, things do move accordingly. And we still must focus in on the projects and things that we must do. We may not win all of them because when it comes down to the people matters in all of our communities. We are a city of many, and we are a city that is in mourning. Our attorney, Ms. Wynn, she's still lingering with the loss of her son. Ms. Gwen Oakes, the senior director, in the loss of her son, which will be eulogized this coming Saturday. Miss Edwina and Rodney Wade, in the loss of their daughter as well as son-in-law. And let us not forget our very own officer in his down settings, in his family as well. There is no winners here. There is none. We as a city, we must proceed and not prolong anything. It is a lot that is going on amongst the city, the residents, and its employees. We give our condolences to Mother Matthew in the loss of her son, her husband, Deacon Matthew, and to Betsy Brown and D.L. Lassie, along with their daughters that are taking care of them. We want to give you that encouragement too, that you continue to take care of your loved ones. And we as a city, we will band together and take care of all of these losses here amongst us. I was informed that the senior prom that was to be held on this coming Saturday, it will be postponed for July the 15th. And that is okay, because it is a lot that is going on with we as residents. And we as residents, we are family, no matter what, under the circumstances. You all know Miss Edwina as Edwina. Miss Graham, auntie, knows her as Beanie, as well as Rodney and those oldest and all of those children. See, Liz Wade and I, we would go after each other because that's what family and in-laws do. But it does not distinguish and litigate the love. So we as a city, we do what's necessary.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Brown.
Miss J.B. Dixon, and I believe Mr. Julian left. Mr. Julian Jackson.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. JB.
Thank you. J.B. Dixon, Riviera Beach on Singer Island. Thank you for your vote today about the zoning. And I meant what I said about how impressive it was to see the kind of community organizing that went on around this issue. Or in the very beginning, I would have said that I was in favor of changing the zoning and seeing that property developed. I think that people never quite understood that golf courses have not made money in a long time. People are dumping golf courses everywhere. So someone isn't going to come and buy, I think. It would be nice if they would, but I doubt that anyone will put another golf course there simply because that's not a good investment anymore. But because of the efforts of the people who came forward, not just tonight, but many, many other nights, as you know, and stayed here, I was impressed. And I just wish that we could have that kind of community organizing everywhere in the city, because it is sadly lacking. And I just wonder if each of you might take that on in the future in terms of your own district. What would it take for you to bring the people in your districts together to feel the kind of commonality that these people felt? Lacking, obviously, a golf course to do it around. But it is so essential, especially now when the damn governor has us having to re-up our mail-in ballots. That is, a true thing to disenfranchise our votes. And the community, this community in particular, really needs to gather together and have go door to door, get people to re-register for their mail-in ballot, and do it now, because it may be too late by the time they really discover that they're not going to get a mail-in ballot if they don't do that. So let's talk about community organizing around the issues that matter in this community. And let's take a page from the book of the people who did so well for that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, that concludes public comments. I believe Mr. Julian Jackson may have left the meeting already.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Discussion, deliberation, discussion by City Manager.
Mr. Chair, I think there's a desire from Development Service staff as well as legal to have the applicant look to withdraw their application on the remaining items. Director Sermons?
I was going to have him do it. Since it fell like right at the end.
Good evening again, Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services. As of now, the 3 other items on your agenda are considered active applications. So the only way to not hear them, given that they cannot be approved for reasons described earlier and based on the vote on their first item for the rezoning, the applicant would have to vocalize that they are withdrawing those applications so that they would not need to be considered. So with speaking with the applicant, I believe they are prepared to make that statement.
And to that comment, Mr. Sermons, and we'll hear from the applicant as well. We made a motion to deny the application. Is that the same application that they're looking to withdraw?
No, this would be regarding the remaining 3 items submitted by WGI on your agenda for the future land use application, the plat, and the site plan. Those, yes.
Got it. And just for clarity for the record, the motion that was made to deny was the follow-up in reference to the zoning, not the additional plat or the site.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Sermons.
Good evening, Hope Calhoun on behalf of the applicant. I was getting my agenda to get the agenda items, so that's why I stepped away. I did not grab it in time. However, we had an application for a land use plan amendment, which we were advised could have been considered in different order, but was not. So we are going to withdraw that application at this time, not because we feel we have to, because it could still be considered, but we are withdrawing it at this time. We are also withdrawing our rezoning application. I'm sorry, not the rezoning, the site plan application and the plat application. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, follow up to that. Is that sufficient? Is that what we're looking for based on legals and development services recommendations?
Mr. Chair, it will be staff's recommendation that a motion from the board to effectively delete those items from the agenda be proffered by the board and ultimately voted upon.
Motion to delete those items from the agenda.
Second.
Discussion? Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel?
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson?
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson? That vote passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Ms. Calhoun. Discussion, deliberation, City Manager. If you want to address also the public comments as well before you go into your discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Most of the public comments were remarks with regards to certain items. I do want to extend, obviously, condolences to all the employees that have lost loved ones over the little bit of time. We obviously know that it's been a tough road for a lot of folks in the agency, and we've been very intentional about making sure that EAP services and counseling services are provided. So definitely thoughts and prayers with our employees that are going through a lot of challenges right now. Also, we will be not having or rescheduling the regular city council meeting. That meeting is going to be utilized as a budget workshop on July 12th. I'm sorry, your normal meeting that would be July 5th is going to be postponed, but we are going to convene the board to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget for that July 12th date. City offices are closed on Tuesday, July 4th. Regular trash services will be uninterrupted, and we do have the fireworks display at 2 locations, at Bicentennial Park and at Callaway. You'll be able to see the fireworks from either of those locations. There's not a designated viewing area, but we will put out information via communications as some good spots, but conceivably everyone should get a good view of the fireworks. This is probably the last year that we will do the dueling shows. We will probably have a more robust event consistent with what we used to do in the past. Also on Saturday, July 8th at 11 a.m., it is the grand opening of Fire Station 88. So we're excited for that particular event, and the elected officials and the community have seen some of the marketing, and I believe Ms. McCray did send invitation to the elected officials for that particular event. Also, that the police department has completed their relocation to 2051 MLK, which is referred to as the Port Center, and the non-emergency line is 561-845-4126. And that concludes my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Comes City Attorney.
No comments, Mr. Chair.
City Council Committee reports.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Councilwoman, go ahead.
I have committee reports. On June 6th, I attended the Palm Beach County League of Cities District 1 lunch, which is always a very informative meeting. We discussed, among other items, the new requirements for council persons to complete Financial Form 6, which is a financial disclosure form that requires us to list every asset worth more than $1,000. One local mayor has already resigned his position. He announced that at the luncheon as a result of this legislation, and there may be more resignations to come. It's really an onerous requirement, and we may want to seek advice from our city attorney with regard to our obligations. That's something we should discuss with city manager. On June 9th, I attended the Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee meeting. On June 14th, I attended the Palm Beach County Housing Steering Committee meeting, and Ms. Jenkins will have some very exciting news to share. I won't take her sharing of it away from her. It's going to be a great opportunity for her to share that news with you. And this morning, I attended the Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce Business Before Hours Economy of Sustainability meeting. Should I continue with my? Thank you.
If you can continue with comments as well, thank you.
I wanted to thank the ambassadors and the CRA staff who assisted with the World Oceans Day concert and hanging of the art for the exhibition. The concert was a great success, and as you can see, the artwork is exceptional. It's just a great job. They all did a wonderful, wonderful job for us. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit the Marina Event Center, if you're watching, please come over and see this ocean-centric exhibition. The artwork will be on display until the end of August. On June 12th, Chanel Gordon and I rode the Palm Tran bus that services the residents of Azure Estates. And the following day, I spoke at the county commissioners meeting about the importance of continuing to fund public transportation. There was some word on the street that the commission might be reducing or in fact eliminating some of the routes that serve some of our communities. I spoke as a concerned citizen, not as a council person representing Riviera Beach, but Commissioner McBernard and I will ride the bus together again on July 5th at 8 a.m. And I'm hoping that other council people may choose to join us. The Singer Island Town Hall meeting will take place on Thursday, July 29th at 6 o'clock at the Ambassador Center. You must pre-register by emailing Mary Small at msmall@rivierbeach.org because we have limited space available. Jazz on the Beach will also be that night at 7, so we promise to finish the town hall meeting in time for the concert. In collaboration with Commissioner Lanier's office, we're holding an Azure Estates Health Fair and Back to School Bash on July 29th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And another reminder that the Palm Beach State College, City of Riviera Beach College Credit Certificate Program will be starting up again. I'm very, very proud about that. I'm pleased about it. And if you're interested in taking those courses, they're free if you qualified for financial aid, or if you were a city employee, contact Mary Small at msmall@rivierbeach.org. And I want to add my condolences to everyone in the city who has lost a loved one recently. It's a very tragic series of events. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lanier?
I just also wanted to mention the possibility of losing the Palm train routes. You can take a survey at palmbeachtpa.org/transit, encouraging residents to share their transit needs. Also, the 1619 project event held this past Thursday, the 15th, was a success. Brian Knowles and Ms. Leah Gaines provided great historical insight into African-American history and engaged the community with a quote museum. The artwork display was beautiful, and many of the participants walked away with a copy of the 1619 project. Thank you to all who were involved in the planning process and execution, especially my legislative aide, Chanel Gordon. Thank you all of the participants for coming out and sharing your knowledge. Because this is the summer and a lot of the children are out of school, we still want to, and this is something the city wants to do more of, is getting involved in the educational experience for our children in Riviera Beach. One education tip: by using the Savas Realize Parents Corner, you will learn how to support your child's academic growth in mathematics. The Savas Realize is a tool used in the school district to support math instruction. It's www.parents.savvas.com. And that is for my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Miller Anderson?
Just wanted to just ditto what Mr. Evans stated regarding the losses that we've had in the city. Also, I just want to announce the Lakeview Park Town Hall meeting that I'll be having for discussions regarding Robovich Safe Harbor, public safety initiatives, roads and infrastructure, and an update on the mooring field. We'll have representatives from various departments. This will be on June 27th at the Clean and Safe Office, 1229 East Blue Heron Boulevard, from 6 to 8 p.m. So those of you that live in the Lakeview Park community, please be sure to come out. That's it for my announcements.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman McCoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We on not committees, we're on general.
Public, just general comments.
Thank you. You know, I've alluded to this early in the meeting, but Mr. Evans, I really think we need to figure out in the interim a few things. Number one, our internal auditor function, how we're going to do that going forward, and what we actually do to ensure that folks follow the rules here, because apparently there's always an exception to the rule that I didn't know exists or somebody creates or some sort of reason. And I just really find it very disturbing that I was very harsh with you on your evaluation, Mr. Evans, because I can't evaluate the city clerk. I can't evaluate the deputy city manager. I can't cover for administration when I see issues that's outstanding, right? We have very, you know, and I don't know how difficult this is. You know, we brought up some time ago just about shoring up that we are fairly compensated when we travel. That issue has been addressed by most agency already. The federal government routinely revisits this. It's issue after issue. For whatever reason, we are still falling behind on doing operational activities. P-card travel has been outstanding since 2019. I find that very, very hard to believe that this is that tough. not having a contract manager, like these kind of issues where contracts fall between the cracks. I can tell you the other issue that I brought up to the auditor was the e-roadmap, but obviously that issue did not occur in that fiscal year because the invoices I seen came up in November. But I don't know why it's okay, or maybe it's tough and I don't know about it. But if I don't know, I can only assume. But what I do know is things are left unaddressed. And so many times we find ways and reasons to do everything. I mean, that issue killed me when I heard a construction saw on Juneteenth going all day, and there's not one person in the entire city that can go and address this issue other than the police department. Like, I don't expect perfect. I expect people to come here and put forth effort. I don't know why it is that administration allows department heads to be relieved at public comments. We have a specific prohibition in our code that we can't give them orders. I asked the chief a question yesterday. Graciously, he responded. But if I wanted to raise an issue in the midst of my colleagues to address to a department head, they're gone. So like, I don't want to have to call Mr. Evans on the weekend because I know that there are critical organizational issues that have to be addressed. We have to work on being efficient as an organization. And I can tell you that efficiency is close to the bottom. I just want people to put forth 100% effort. If they can't do it, don't hold up and stand behind a lie. Don't stand up and present things that we know aren't factual or truth that we can't defend. All right, that's enough on that one. The other issue is to this whole item on Lone Pine today. I wrestle with this, right? Because I certainly want to be concerned with how our residents think and what they believe should be in their community. But who am I as an elected official to tell someone what they can do with their own property? We had about 20 public comments regarding this item. That's not even a tenth of the number of individuals that live in that community. And I respect the decision of the body. But what I have issue is, don't make the suggestion that there's suspect or you may be on the take. As much as people don't like me or don't agree with me, that's fine. I sleep good at night. There's something I wake up to every morning called a moral compass, and that drives the decisions that I make. So the notion that we got to be on the take, you know what I'm on the take for? A better community, a better Riviera Beach, something that was different than when it was when I was a little boy, me and my brother walking over to Wells Recreation. I'm seeing the same things 35 years later that's still existing. The processes are still the same. I want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge and we're doing things like other cities, but yet we get tied up in stuff like fireworks. I don't like the fact that we're doing fireworks. So guess what? When we have this budget discussion, you can be assured somebody ain't gonna have a job come this new fiscal year. Like, that kind of stuff eats me up. So like, let's get our priorities right as an organization, because we don't just live here, but we have folks that depend and rely on us for a career to feed their family. And I want to make good on it. That's why I choose to follow the rules. And I know that doesn't come to be popular sometimes. And I'll tell you the truth. Am I the only one that ain't afraid to call truth to power? I don't have a problem with standing alone. But please respect me enough, or probably figure out who Trodrick McCoy is, to know that my motivation is not about anything illicit or illegal. And I stand by that. I have a 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old. And, even some of the comments that was said today about, most people know my son, and I'm very much proud of all of the progress that he makes, but certain things just bother me, and it cuts to the core that people would suggest that, well, we know who's suspect because I deal with a group of classroom people that nobody wants to deal with. Guess what? I was one of those people. My son has special needs, and I can appreciate everybody bringing their opinion, but what I don't appreciate is folks to ridicule you and suggest that your motivation is anything but pure and have a desire and a good motivation to see what's good in this community. And I rest on that. I mean, you can take it for what it is, but I expect that when we have items that aren't fully cooked, I don't want it to come before us, because that's something that you have to live with. Maybe not now today, but when that IG report comes back and you get called down to the office, well, yeah, I didn't realize that staff put something in front of me that perhaps wasn't exactly consistent with the code of ordinances. And then when a board member brings it up, even with the recommendation of the city attorney, we choose to disregard it and vote for it anyways. Make it make sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Lanier, you had another comment?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that I wanted to congratulate the Marina Grande community in terms of the appellate court's decision to strike down the Seven King Holdings argument in regards to the restaurant that they wanted to build, or the access that they wanted to their parking garage. And saying that, when that issue came up before Marina Grand, it is an example of how when communities stick together, how the issues that they are passionate and concerned about, which includes whatever it is that's coming into their neighborhood, that they have a say in it, and that they can come together as a community to make sure that whatever it is, they are on the same accord with how this council recognizes it. So I really wanted to say congratulations to Marina Grand and also to Long Pines, those communities coming together to make sure that something that they don't want is something that we have to respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And to echo some of the comments of my colleague and the concerns, I believe that we're up here, Mr. Evans, just to continue to serve as elected duly body. And we just need to make sure that we're giving all the information, everything is cooked properly, and we're prepared to vote properly. The concern that I had tonight was one of the items was not a recommendation by staff. It was just a review and a decision. And every other item since I've been sitting on the dais has been a recommendation either for or against it. So for future, I would just kind of like to see that for all the items so that we can kind of still make a conscious decision to see what direction we want to go as a board, but with the recommendation of staff letting us know that they've looked at it, they've reviewed it, they've done all the due diligence research. Having conversations with a lot of the residents from Lone Pine, we still have to figure out what we're going to do with that parcel and everything else in our community. With our zoning issues, I know we're addressing our comp plan, our comprehensive plan, that's in the works, but there's a lot of stuff that's falling behind, and we're starting to see things that are affecting our community. This week was devastating with the lives that we've lost, and we can't honestly sit up here and say that we're being effective when a lot of this is happening on a regular basis. We have to kind of put our foot down and be very aggressive and intentional with protecting the lives of these residents, with developing the community and the land, with addressing some of the lack of development. I couldn't support this project because it seemed like there was an outcry from our residents that did not want this item to be rezoned because of the green space. That doesn't change the fact that we have so much that needs to be done. We have to bring in some additional ad valorem dollars. We have to continue to focus on our site plan and zoning. We have to address our facilities. So we just need some additional help with staff and whatever resources you need. Some of the concerns, I think, I've never had an issue with addressing and talking to my directors or my department heads or any of them in regards to questions and issues, giving them direction. We continue to follow the charter and we give that to you. So that's why it's kind of here to say, Mr. Evans, this is what we need. What you need from us, we'll give to you. It's just we need to get the job done on all bases. So whatever you need, you let us know. Moving forward, what we can do as a city is in these agenda reviews, in these workshops, budget workshops, put it all on the table. Make sure that when we have these discussions over these next couple of weeks, that you just say, this is everything that I need to make sure I get the job done, and we're going to push it to the limit. And we'll have those tough discussions because that's what the workshops are being set for. So that's where we set the legislative, well, we set the budget items that you bring to us, and we'll be prepared for it. And colleagues, please, the agenda reviews, the discussions, everything that we have outside of these meetings, just make sure we're doing it to the very best of our ability to be prepared to move the city forward. Only comments that I have for tonight is in reference to the mental health event that we're going to be having on Monday. It is June 26th. It's going to be right here at the Marina, partnering with Mind Over You. It's going to be a men's mental health for fathers, husbands, and leaders of your household to talk about mental health in our community. So please be here 6 p.m. on Monday. And I wanted to also take this last moment before we adjourn to just thank the last 4.5 years of a great young man from this community. Javarius Jackson has served as my legislative aide, and he served very well. Before that, he served as an employee for the city, as an ambassador, as another legislative aide for a previous commissioner, and the chair for the Charter Review Committee. He served out at the county as an employee for the county as well, and he's going to be relocating and accepting a job promotion. So I'm just very proud of him and honored that he could serve with me for the last 4.5 years for the residents of Riviera Beach. And I wanted to introduce my new legislative aide, Ms. Danielle O'Sullivan. She'll be keeping the same number for Mr. Jackson, so we'll still have a contact, and she's here with us tonight. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Jackson, for your time, and welcome Ms. Danielle to the family. Everybody, if we have any other comments, Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.